Welcome everyone, live viewers, chatters, and you people in the future who might be watching this later. Hello to you as well. Hope you all are well. Thanks again, Sebs, for that raid. That was awesome. So tonight, we're gonna mostly meander about, but of course, first things first, we have to get our quote-unquote morning cartoons out of the way. Might not be morning here right now, but I'm sure it's morning somewhere. Right? We are on episode 15 of this. And then I'm gonna get you comrades to decide on a future video as well. So let me prepare a poll for you all.
연대장, 내가 너에게 주려는 특수임무란 뭔가? 난 이번에 꽃동산과 가까운 토끼동산에서 열리게 되는 스키 경기대회에 애꾸 특무대장을 보내서 독가시와 접선하게 하려고 한다. 독가시가 보내는 정보 자료에 의해서 우리의 총 공격 작전이 결정되는 것만큼 연대장이 함께 가서 애꾸가 정확히 받아오는가를 잘 살펴야겠다. 이게 바로 특수임무다.
알았습니다.
이놈의 둘쥐 새끼.
은하수아, 특무대장과 함께 토끼동산으로 떠난다. 특무대장과 독가시의 접선이 예견된다. 방울꽃. 애꾸놈이 독가시의 정보 자료를 그대로 받아가면 우리 꽃동산 작전에 불리할 뿐만 아니라 애꾸놈이 신임을 받아 금세기까지 위험할 수 있습니다.
6:30 a.m. in Palestine. There you go.
하탄시키는 것이 어떻습니까?
Perfect time for morning cartoons, if you ask me. I think I was up about then watching morning cartoons.
건무전을 보내겠습니다. 방울꽃 앞 적집이 대장놈이
They'd only be on for a certain amount of time during the day, so you had to get up early, catch all the ones you could, and then just be adult programs for the rest of the day. Hey, 2023.
11번 듣습니다. 방금 물오리 부대에서 연락이 왔는데 중상을 입었던 물오리가 의식을 회복했다고.
Okay, so I'm doing a poll. What do we watch after? I have a few short clips and one news thing that I want to watch with you comrades. But then I'm gonna let you choose whether we watch that brand new DPRK parade that just happened. Now it would be in Korean because it's so new, it's not translated yet, but we could still check it out if you comrades want. Or there's a Luna Oi video about democratic centralism, or part of that series on what Lenin said about democracy.
고맙습니다. 물오리가 꽃동산 방송으로 노래를 불러주겠단 말이지. 야, 좋구나. 야. 박지섬에 가 있는 kum세기도 함께 듣겠구나. 너도 좋지? 응? 빨리 가자. 잠시 후 경기를 시작하겠습니다. 선수들은 빨리 출발선으로 나와 주십시오.
Okay, here's the poll. I'm gonna set it for 10 minutes. So what do we watch later when we're done these short videos I got planned? Do we watch the newest DPRK parade, the one that the Russian
통을 먹이겠는데.
diplomat just witnessed with
어떻게 한대?
when he visited just now. So again, that's brand new. Doesn't have translations. It's like 2 hours, but it's supposed to be a pretty impressive parade, I guess, where we can watch Luna Oi, what her video on what Lenin said about democracy, or we can watch Carl Za on crumbling U.S. hegemony, or we can watch Michael Parenti creating a sustainable economy. Polls in chat now.
이놈이 무슨 꿍꿍이를 하는 걸까?
조금만 더 따라오라. 조금만 더. 보자. 내기 같은 게.
타는 솜씨가 대단하던데요?
재팬 선수를 넘어뜨린 건 규정 위반이라고 보는데 어떻습니까?
그렇지 않습니까?
Little foul to nudge your competitor. What do you think? Yeah, it is a tough decision, isn't it, Dorian?
아니 이건 시기야.
They're all interesting videos, and that's why I mean, no, I believe in democracy. That's why I want you all to choose, not because I couldn't choose myself. Not that at all. No, never that.
지금쯤 병원 침대에서 뒹굴고 있겠지.
무대장.
어? 아니. 아까는 참 미안하게 됐어.
There's no wrong answer. They're all good videos.
꽤나 내시던데요.
I haven't seen any of them. I might have seen the Michael Parenti talk.
왜 독가실 만나지 않소?
아, 난 이미 독가시를 만나 내 할일을 다 했단 말이오. 자, 요거. 왜? 독가시를 보고 싶어서. 내가 그것까지 호락호락 보여줄 수 없지 않소? 에?
하, 역시 특무대장의 솜씨가 이만저만 아니군요. 그럼 안녕히.
은하수와 줄다람이 보고에 의하면 에코노미 받은 정보 자료는 필름터리로 되어 있음. 가짜 필름을 보낼 것.
됐다. 이제는 본부에서 보내는 가짜 필름을 바꿔놓기만 하면
They've had the spy mission going on now for several episodes.
어떻게 대장님한테 보고한다. 아, 그렇지.
안녕하십니까?
예,
손님이 부탁하신 책을 가져왔습니다.
그랬어.
여기에 경기 장면을 녹한 테이프와 함께 필요한 것들이 다 들어있다고 합니다.
So far, Luna Oi is ahead with 1 vote for each other option so far. Everybody make your voices heard in the poll.
다시. 저렇게 늦게 받았구나. 됐다. 이젠 정보 자료를 있구나 모르게 바꿔놓어야 한다.
내가 그놈의 토끼 새끼를 어디서 봤더라. 분명
Oh shit.
얼굴인데.
Look at me, being a pro streamer.
아하, 꽃동산 요원. 그렇다면 그 현대장놈이 혹시 특별 보좌관과 할까?
One day I'll remember to do that right after the intro.
차 한 잔.
네.
저놈을 어떻게 검토한다?
날 한번 잡아봐.
옳지. 요것들을 이용해보자.
빨리. 아프니?
정만 하는 무관인 줄 알았더니 동정심이 많으시군.
특무대장, 여기가 토끼동산이라는 걸 잊지 마시오.
증거해줘서 고맙소. 난 워낙 남을 물고 뜯는 데 습관이 돼놔서. 포도지포 연대자 욕심이 다해. 어딘가 냄새가 다르거든. 그놈과 같이 있다간 내가 언제 함정에 빠질지 모른다. 그러니 빨리 여기를 빠져나가야 한다.
That little spin he did.
아니, 어딜 가시렵니까?
내 좀 볼 일이 있어서.
오늘 폐막식 있다고 했는데.
아 참, 내가 그걸 깜빡 잊었군. 내가 피막식에 빠질 수야 없지. 아, 자 그럼 몽땅 나를 감시하는 게 아니야. 어떻게 해야 누구도 모르게 빠져나갈 수 있을까?
들어가겠습니다. 자, 문이 열렸습니다. 자, 나옵니다.
옳지. 아니,
어딜 이렇게
교회국장에 가보지 않겠어?
교회국장이요?
예. 요놈이 날 몰래 감시하고 있었구나. 하지만 네가 하나 하면 난 요를 한다. 어디 골탕을 먹어봐라.
What is he about to do?
그런데 교회국장은 왜 갑자기?
텔레비전을 보니 참 재미있더군. 난 오늘 저녁 공연을 꼭 봐야겠어.
줄다람아, 오늘 밤 9시.
I always say the vehicles are like my favorite part.
할수 없지.
Look at this mix of bizarre yet familiar. Someone who consumes US occupied Korean media never stop finding interesting the different Korean accent and DPRK media. Feel it sharper, like there's more conviction. Interesting, Sebs. I have heard similar things from my comrades before.
이사님이
나야 뭘? 거기서
나요? 난 떨려서.
제가 나가겠습니다. 잘 보라고.
감사합니다. 어서 나오십시오.
I know that, like in South Korea, they use more words that have like Boro terms in them. Yeah, they really use their diaphragm. Welcome, Voodoo.
다시 나오겠습니다. 다시.
Hope you were well tonight, comrade.
이놈이 도망쳤구나. 그렇지. 이제는 할 수 없다. 저놈을 죽이고라도 정보 자료를 바꿔도.
It says, oh really? Wow, I swore it was just going to be one K-pop group, and now I can differentiate accents. Hey, you've acquired a skill then, you mean? Welcome into home of Juche Gang Live there, Voodoo. Hopefully your night gets better.
아니, 이놈 어디 갔을까? 11번, 11번.
We've now entered the age of boiling, I hear, so
정말아.
I guess that's always nice.
내 짐작대로 꽃동산 정찰병이 틀림없구나. 꽃동산 정찰병, 네 놈이 감히 나를 이겨보겠다고? 내 이제 네 놈의 대갈통을 박살낼 테다.
누가 이기는가는 아직 장담 못할 걸. 야, 네 놈의 뒤에.
Alright, we only got a tiny bit left to vote here. Do you want to see the newest DPRK parade? Luna Oi on Lenin on democracy, Carl Zaw on US hegemony breaking down, or Parenti on creating a sustainable economy? Vote now, it's your last chance.
사태 맛이나 봐라.
Well, it's actually different what you meant. The big reason for the difference in accents, Dorian, is actually because of U.S. occupation, right? That's why, like in South Korea, there's all kinds of loan words. Whereas instead of using those loan words as a shortcut in DPRK, they would just use their traditional Korean language to accomplish the same phrase. Or whatever. Alright, Luna Oi is gonna be after our short videos. We got a couple, like a DPRK music track. I want to listen to Paul Robson sing the USSR anthem. And then I get another short video from my comrade Natalie. From her channel, anyway. It's very interesting, like case study, in the way this U.S. occupation created this like colonial language in the South, you know? Actually, that's one thing that like former citizens of DPRK that wind up in the South for whatever reason, that's like part of the discrimination that they face, right? Because instead of using those English borrow words, the loan words in their language, they would use just traditional Korean language only.
내 기어이 사랑하는 꽃동산을 지켜낼 테다. 에코 동무대장이 만약의 경우를 생각한다면서 여기 와 있을 하고서는 왜 소식이 없어? 야, 가판에 나가 잘 살펴봐.
네네네네. 자,
자식 왜 몸을 꼬면서 그래?
나도 참.
아이고 형님 보고 벌써 있나? 했다.
춥다. 아, 자, 물망쳐이 개자식아, 이 추운 데서 나온 척 감시하란 말이야? 안경제이 병신 같은 놈, 확 뒤져라.
뭐? 저 자식이
저 불신호.
야, 동무대장이다. 탐조등. 네.
I feel like there were still different accents, but there's just demeanor or vibe to the cadence that I find strikingly difficult. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I imagine just in different regions in Korea there would be difference in like accents, just like in any other place, right? Like for setting aside the division by U.S. imperialists.
이놈을 살려보낼 수 없어. 길을 수로려냈다.
For example, even DPRK today, I imagine people in one part of DPRK sound vastly different than people closer to the border with China, for example. Tends to be just the nature of language.
조그마한 놈이 어떻게 날 이기는 거냐?
저 하나 살구멍만 찾는 네놈들은 그 힘이 어디서 생기는 것인지 알지 못할 것이다.
Jesus.
아니, 동무들.
I would say the music in this, even though, you know, I couldn't have grown up with this cartoon, of course, it still gives me those nostalgic Saturday morning cartoon vibes whenever I hear the music start to come in. Oh.
참어도 내가 떠난 다음 날 향해 싸격해줘. 줄다라마 잠모동 빨리. 이런 탄
Jesus Christ. Well, there you have it. Sometimes they get a little wild. Hey Cinnamon, welcome comrade. How are you this evening? Yeah, I love the guns and the fireworks. It was cute. Thank you. I see a cute little turtle. That's cool. I like cute little turtles. Sure you can imagine. Alright. Oh, I want to hear this song.
We fought for the future, destroyed the invader, and brought to our homeland the laurels of fame. Her glory will live in the memory of nations, and all generations will honor her name. Long live our Soviet motherland, built by the people's mighty hand. Long live her people, united and free.
Hey GMO, welcome
Strong in a
comrade.
friendship tried by fire. Long may our crimson flag inspire, shining in glory for all men to see.
Such a good version, you know?
Long live our Soviet
Damn, Paul.
motherland, built by the people's mighty hand.
Oh yeah, thank you GMO.
United and free, strong in a friendship tried by fire.
Soon we will have that webcam and then I can just blow the smoke at the camera. Great. Okay, this is the video from Comrade Natalie. His Joe Hill rendition. Yeah. If you're in my Discord GMO, you should send me a link to that for the next time. Look, chat. They're getting big. Look at this thing. It's been what, like a month and a half maybe since they hatched? So this one's Felicia, this one's Gwen, and Mary Jane. We don't have names for that one yet. This one's Eddie. Eddie probably won't be able to stay because Yeah, we already have a Drake. Two Drakes together don't tend to get along so good. So Eddie will probably have to go. But there's the duckies. They're growing fast. One day we'll have that duck camera too. Also, check this out. They say about DPRK having a personality cult. This my friend, my comrade got this email from the NDP. Hey, did you see Jang Meat's email below? You have a chance to win an all expenses paid trip to Ottawa, 2 nights in a hotel, and a fantastic dinner with Jang Meat. What the hell would you want to meet the NDP leader for? Oh my goodness. That is ridiculous. Settle down. Settle down. No one wants to have dinner with the goddamn leader of the NDP. Jesus Christ, that's ridiculous. Be like going to have dinner with Justin Trudeau or something. Can you imagine? Who would want to do that? I would not want to meet that person. Here was this post I noticed yesterday. Yeah, it is a punishment, right? You're not a celebrity, you're yeah, a hotel, right? It's a you get there and it turns out it's actually a motel and it's a catering service. That sounds right in line with the NDP, to be honest. Yeah, check me. Yeah, exactly. I don't need to meet Jack Meat. Tell him he can have his own. He can have his dinner by himself or whatever with his own family. I have no desire to meet him. Maybe to ask him, excuse me, why do you want to continue imperialism while pretending to be for the workers? That would be interesting. Take the trip to blow him off, or just to do like what I said, right? Just to go there and be like, yeah, so why are you the leader of a party that wants to continue imperialism? He just gets up and leaves. Probably. Security fucking surrounds me suddenly. It's time for you to leave. That's probably that's probably what it would be, right? Hand on the shoulder. It's time to go. Sir, we think you should go back to the hotel now. This is, Mr. Jangmin is now tired. Look at this bloodthirsty little imperialist here. I should apply and stream the dinner. Excuse me, Mr. Jangmi. My yeah, content baby. Excuse me, Mr. Jangmi. My chat would like to know why the hell you're such a bloodthirsty imperialist while pretending to care about people. Comments, please. I'm a very serious Twitch journalist. I see chat likes this idea. We'll see what we can do. We'll see. Look at this bloodthirsty little imperialist here, though. Today we honor the brave Canadians who fought in the Korean War. What the hell is there to honor about that? Defended the values of peace by fighting. They defended the values of peace by invading a country. Okay. Freedom and democracy. Yeah, because we all know that democracy that South Korea had there, right? We all remember that? Their service and sacrifice continues to be remembered. In Korea. Does it? Does it though? I'm not even gonna subject anyone to that. There we go. We helped America commit a genocide in Korea to prop up a brutal military dictatorship. Yeah, oh yeah, of course he can't be original. Of course he can't be. For that, Sebs, Canada would first have to act on anything other than exactly what the US tells it to do, right? But in fact, it's literally like a puppet on a string. Marionette. If you don't know, like one of the recent events was the US was criticizing Canada on not contributing enough to its military spending. Because the requirement for NATO, I think, is something like each country has to contribute 2% of their GDP to military spending in order to be supposedly eligible to maintain their NATO membership. And Canada wasn't doing this, so now Justin Trudeau pledging to step up military spending at all costs. Again, these are all fucking imperialists. Do you think Jagmeet, NDP leader who is supposed to be for workers, did he oppose this at all? Oh no, not that. No, he didn't oppose that. And in fact, Jagmeet is also pushing the line that China helped Justin Trudeau into power for some fucking reason. God only knows. In their own reactionary little brains makes sense. Like, what on earth could China gain out of having fucking Justin Trudeau as president, prime minister? Make us look ridiculous? Is that what it is? Make Canada look as ridiculous as possible. That's China's end game. Justin Trudeau elected, and then Canada will be the laughingstock of the world. That's what they're thinking, right? Yeah, Canada is Ukrainian fascist central. Or Krista Freeland, who's like some important government person, her grandfather is a Nazi and she refused to denounce her grandfather. She's like, I don't denounce my grandfather, who was a Nazi. And also, please ignore the Nazi statues in Canada all over the place. My take was, you mean to say you honored the genocidal thugs who invaded and helped steal half a country? Of course, that is completely in line with your country's continued genocidal campaign against hundreds of First Nations. There we go, that's my take on it. What the fuck? Isn't NATO supposed to be for peace? They can't even pretend, right? They can't even play pretend, right? Hell no, they can't. NATO. What an awful, awful organization. I think we can all agree to that. So if you don't know, by the way, we have a challenge going on. If by the end of the month you comrades get me to 100,000 labor vouchers, then you're force me to play this game for 2 hours long. Look at how awful
Why did
this
I make
looks.
this?
Do you want to see me suffer?
This
I think you
horrible
do.
hike up an impossible mountain.
I'm a masochist.
I could have made something you would have
I'll
liked.
like it.
A game that was empowering,
There
that
we
would save
go.
your progress and inch you steadily forward. Since success is delicious, that would have been wise. Instead, I must confess, this isn't nice. It tastes of bitterness. It's
The
capricious. It
contributions
sets
rolling in. We're
setbacks
at
for the ambitious.
60% and
It
still
likes
20
lenience.
days
It's
left.
bracing, inhumane. But not everyone's the same. I created this game for a certain kind of person. To
Who
hurt
doesn't
them.
want to see me suffer, you know? You want to see me maybe have a little crime stream? A little bit of crime. A little crime stream. By the way, if you don't know, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we do theory reads on this channel. Oh, the game is very dark. And Sebs, eventually you like the level wraps up around itself. So you can be several hours in, and if you make one little mistake, oh, what do you know? You're way back at the very beginning. Is there checkpoints? No. It's meant to be just as punishingly, brutally difficult as possible. But I for some reason, I like that. Don't ask. Don't think about it too hard. I swear. I swear it's not that weird. It's not abnormal, I swear. Not reflective of anything wider, no. By the way, oh yeah, that's not the command I was looking for. If you type in reading, you can see what we're reading on Tuesdays and Thursdays anytime. Going through Red Skin, White Masks right now. Then after that, we have a Kim Jong-il read to get to. And then we're also watching a couple movies on the channel. So the next movie is going to be part 2 of Lake Changjin.
30 cal heavy machine gun, 105 HP, 60mm mortar.
Keep the rest on full alert. Wait to spring the
Person
trap.
said making a game should be easy, right? Then realized how painfully exhausting it is and said, you know what, fuck them. Make them suffer just as much. And then twisted people like me go, yeah, I like this. I think I'll play this.
7连和9连配合，分4路行动搭桥。
我操！
那是我们的边界，祖国的方向。
新中国万岁！
新中国万岁！新中国万岁！
新中国万岁！
Battle at Lake Changjin Part 2 should be great. The first one was fantastic. And then after that, I'm thinking we're gonna watch this. Comrade Kim Goes Flying. Look at how awesome this looks.
엄마, 비둘기는 어떻게 하늘을 나나?
그건 날개가 있기 때문이란다.
나도 날개가 있으면 하늘을 날 수 있나?
그럼
뛰어내리라!
떠서 다니지 말고 땅에 발붙이고 살아라. 노동자 이술 직전에 출연시킵시다.
아닙니다. 잠깐만.
너는 땅속에서나 하늘을 날아보기도 하고
누워서 침에 들면 제 얼굴에 떨어진다는 걸 알아요.
부처녀가 자꾸만 눈앞에 울거리는 게 깨라는 거 말이에요.
문찬 재미같거든.
Yeah? Yay or nay? We watching that movie soon? What do you think, chat? I see your fucking opinions in the chat, please. Trying to decide whether that makes for an good upcoming movie after Lake Changjin Part 2.
This is Park Woo-in,
Right?
who is studying at the Pyongyang College of Medical Sciences. She had lived on
Seems like it'll be
wheelchair
cute.
10 years
Exactly.
before.
Alright, cool.
A few days after
So
she
that'll
was
be her
born,
third
her
stream
disease
movie.
was diagnosed as an incurable one, like a sentence of death. As she grew up, she could not speak properly or walk even a step. Seeing her, her parents said she was born unfortunate. but now she's walking freely.
The story my
More
comrade
than 10
Natalie
years
posted.
ago, a teacher of the Jesan Primary School in Hyungjaesan district visited the village where Park Woo-in was living so as to investigate the children of school age. Get on my back. Let's go to school. Park Woo-in shed tears which dropped on the back of the teacher.
우리 우인이가 선생님이 등에 업힌 것이 그때가 처음이 아닙니다. 유치원 시절부터 선생님이 등에 업고 우리들도 배아지고 너래도 배아지던 선생님의 모습을 보면서 어머니인 나도 그렇게 하지 못했는데 하는 생각으로 눈물을 흘렸습니다.
In 2010, Park Woo-in became a pupil of a primary school like others. Her teacher and neighbors regarded the pain of a disabled girl as their own and showed their love and sincerity to her. Seeing them, Park Woo-in thought,
나는 정말 저런 사람들 속에서 살고 있구나. 치료를 위해 병원에 400여일가 있으면서 내가 직접 보고 느낀 것들을 이 일기장에 담았습니다. 평범한 군인의 딸 상의자 선의 병을 고쳐주겠다고 유능한 선생님들과 함께 많은 사람들이
Today I've got 7 pairs of shoes at a time from doctors, a leading official of the district, my teacher, Sister Sun-hee in my sick room, and the reporter who came for coverage. They said they wanted to see me standing on my own legs. In fact, I had no time to put on pretty shoes as I got on the back of others and lived on wheelchair. I'd like to stand on my legs as soon as possible to please all of them. As a matter of fact, it is said that her disease was regarded as an incurable disease worldwide and few cases restored. However, Park Woo-in was recovered in nearly a year and set her feet on the land thanks to the benefits of the socialist health system and the devotion of medical workers. That day, she wrote a poem representing her feelings.
사정없이 날려가는 씨앗을 보며 애원하는 나무 씨앗아 제발 억터에 묻혀다오.
What a pity! Though it struggled and implored, the seed fell down on a rock. The sky of my grateful motherland, however, did not remain indifferent to the destiny of the seed. It sent a gracious rain like life-giving water to the drying seed, so that the latter could be carried on the waves into the fertile land. In 2020, Park Woo-in became a student of the Pyongyang College of Medical Sciences. She's slower than others in writing and does not feel well as yet. But she always feels the love and affection of the most considerate teachers and fellow students.
나에게 사심 없는 총을 부어준 많은 사람들에게 기쁨을 주고 싶습니다. 들판의 작은 꼬마용과도 같은 한 상의자 사내를 차별 없이 안아 키워준 저국에 꼭 보답하겠습니다.
Well, there you go, Chad. Jesus. That was
We're all after something.
Like the bear strings a little
And
bit more
that
than I
something?
expected it to.
It's a feeling.
This is a Morang Bong band now. Link you to this one too here. Sounds great. They have some fantastic violin players in that band. Case in point. Like borderline playing it like a fiddle. How are you tonight, by the way, Frank? Just had some noodles. Well, noodles tend to do improve one's mood. That was great. The
This is
smile
Radio
she gave
Truth, a
after
series of
saluting
commentaries
there.
by Dr. Michael Parenti. Michael Parenti is an activist and internationally known award-winning author and scholar. His recent books include The Assassination of Julius Caesar and Super-Patriotism. His latest book, The Culture Struggle, will be released in November 2005.
She was like, oh yeah,
For further
I can
information,
play.
please visit his website, michaelparenti.org.
Welfare for the wealthy. Big business is fond of preaching the virtues of self-reliance and individual initiative. Big businessmen are fond of denouncing those who run to the government for handouts. But in fact, no interest feeds more lavishly out of the public trough than corporate America. Successive
gotta have some
administrations
Parenti,
have dedicated
once per stream
themselves
at least.
to supporting the corporate system. They offer an array of subsidies and services to business. They impose a taxation system that shifts costs and diseconomies onto the general public. And they launch military spending programs that have transformed the United States into a permanent war economy. Rather than a laissez-faire government that does little, we have a corporate state that plays an increasingly active role in sustaining the process of capital accumulation for big corporations. The federal government leases or sells at a mere fraction of market value billions of dollars worth of oil, coal, and mineral reserves and grazing and timberlands. In any given year, the government hands out billions to big business in tax exclusions, tax credits, price supports, loan guarantees, payments in kind, export subsidies, subsidized insurance rates, marketing services, irrigation and reclamation programs, and research and development grants. Billions from the U.S. taxpayer right into the pockets of the big rich corporations.
We also get Skeletor.
The U.S. government permits
being
public
angry.
funds to remain
These are,
on deposit
I figure
in
these are
banks
like our two
without
sort of
collecting
angry
interest.
slash dance
It tolerates
emotes.
overcharging by firms with whom it does business, and it provides long-term credits, tariff protections,
And then we get the
reduced tax
press F
assessments
to pay
for large
respects.
companies. Over $26 billion a year in federal crop subsidies benefit mostly big agribusiness and affluent farmers, with relatively little going to small producers. The federal government is losing up to $52 million a year by charging ranchers below-cost grazing rates on public lands. $97 billion in public subsidies has gone to the nuclear industry. Billions go for research and development straight into the corporate hands without the government collecting a penny in royalties. Mining companies extract valuable minerals
these ones are all
and
the
metals
standard
from
ones,
public
right,
lands
chat?
without paying royalties. One company mined a gold deposit in Nevada with an estimated value of over $7 billion without
emotes.
paying a royalty fee, and with the right, under the law, to purchase the land for $5 an acre. The U.S. Forest Service continues to open up national forests to timber companies at below the cost of running the program, for an average yearly government loss of many millions of dollars. The government directly subsidizes the railroad, airline, and shipping industries. It subsidizes exporters of iron, steel, textiles, tobacco, paper, and other products. Energy companies have received huge amounts in grants and tax incentives to encourage oil exploration. Billions of dollars go to bail out such giant companies as Chrysler and Lockheed, while small businesses are left to sink or swim. When one of the nation's largest banks, Continental Illinois, was on the brink of failure, it received $7.5 billion in federal aid. Another $8 billion went to the International Monetary Fund to offset the losses incurred by U.S. banks in bad loans to third world nations. No mom or pop business is bailed out when they go bankrupt or make a bad investment. These massive handouts supposedly are needed to create jobs, but big corporations create relatively few new jobs, no net gain in jobs after you count all their layoffs and downsizing. Almost all the new jobs in this economy are created from small and medium-sized business and from the growth in federal, state, and local governments. What these massive handouts do create is giant profits for the very few at the top. This is Michael Parenti for Radio Truth.
This commentary was produced by the LA Sound Posse and may be freely copied and distributed. You can find us on the web at lasoundposse.org. The music was Flute Medicine by Synth.
All right, now we got Tell Us Sir here. Wanted to see what was up with this story.
Continues against demonstrators demanding the resignation of President Dina Boluarte with thousands injuries. Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke at a press conference on the results of the Russia-Africa summit, which was held in St. Petersburg and concluded on Friday. And in Nigeria, the leader of the mutinous soldiers who detained a democratically elected president in that African country addressed the nation on Friday, 2 days after the military seized power. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the Telesur headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. Moving with the news, stay with us. In Peru, police repressions continuing against demonstrators that demanded resignation of President Dina Boluarte with thousands injured. Clashes continuing in central Lima as government forces carried out repressive actions against protesters. Demonstrators tried to reach the seat of Congress, but the police agents prevented their advance by applying tear gas bombs to calm down the protest. Popular spokesman denounced that a squad of the National Police fired rubber bullets against the demonstrators, provoking a stampede that tried to avoid being hit. During this day of struggle, the group seeks to maintain the rejection of the recent election of the new board of directors of the Congress, for which they demand the closure and the liberation of the former president, Pedro Castillo. In Venezuela, the National Assembly offered details of the calculations after completing the process of credentials presentations for the nominations to form the new electoral power. The deadline had been extended by the Electoral Nominations Committee of Venezuela in view of the influx of candidates for the rectors and alternates of the National Electoral Council. The process resulted in a record number of 153 applicants, which was highlighted by the president of the Electoral Nominations Committee of the National Assembly, Congressman Giuseppe Alessandrello, as a sign of confidence towards the national parliament.
The growing civic conscience of the society, of the Venezuelan people, the trust in its institutions, the hope for a better future would be one of the readings. The other one is that the country, the people, the society says no to the use of anti-politic tools that were used in the past, and the social network are spreading the intention of the new use of anti-politic tools. Whoever has to listen should listen. Whoever has to see, should watch. Here is a message from society about trust, democracy, and its institutions.
José Gregorio Correa, Vice President of the Electoral Nominations Committee and Deputy of the National Assembly of Venezuela, stated that the parliamentary body will be the one to choose the new National Electoral Council.
Time proved us right. Time meant all of us who are part of this committee and those who are not part of it understand that the way was a democratic solution for everything. That whatever we wanted to lead, we had to lead in a electoral center. That all those failed adventures today are simply pulverized more than failed. The confidence in the National Assembly has made 153 Venezuelans of all tendencies from all regions of the country with different professions come to register this National Assembly, which is the one that will appoint the National Electoral Council for the second time.
The United Nations organization expressed concern over the increase in violence inside and outside Ecuadorian prison and the links with drug trafficking. UN Commissioner Volker Turk acknowledged the challenges faced by Ecuadorian society and authorities in dealing with the wave of violence. There also called for the state of emergency declared to address the situation to respect the principles of legality, necessity, and proportionality. He also called on the government to apply the policy of social rehabilitation of incarcerated persons issued in 2022 and developed with the technical support of the UN Office for Human Rights. In Brazil, farmers complaints and difficulties in access financing claims high interest rates limiting their ability to produce foods. Raising production's costs are limiting small farmers' ability to invest, while consumers are becoming more demanding about the type of and origin of agricultural products. The high interest rates demanded by banks might lead farmers to focus more on a crop yield and marketing than on long-term food security. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is facing new allegations involving him and his aides, asking at Stafford to erase images from cameras at his Florida estate in an effort to obstruct investigation into classified documents. The indictments were made on Thursday in a grand jury update that adds new charges against Trump and another defendant to the case. Associated Press reporter Eric Hooker said the additional charges of obstruction and intentional withholding of national defense information tip to a scale of justice towards new indictments.
Jesus Christ.
Let's take a very short break, but remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account as English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news.
How much shit can he get into, for fuck's sakes? That's ridiculous. They're just gonna keep finding him to fucking help pace.
Welcome back to From the South.
They can't borrow as much,
so spoke at a press conference
they're
on
just
the
gonna
results
keep
of
finding
the Russia
Trump.
Africa Summit, which was held in St. Petersburg and concluded this Friday. According to the Russian president, leaders of African countries attending the summit showed a political will and independence, which is highly appreciated by Moscow. Putin stressed that as a result of the event, Russia and Africa reaffirms their position on the formation of a fair and multipolar world order. He noted that Russia seeks to build strategic cooperation with African states, and they, for their part, have the same intention.
И в первую очередь отмечу одобренную лидерами. Спасибо. В целом же инвестиционных потоков, содержательный и заинтересованный обмен мнениями и устойчивого развития. Мы это ценим.
Comoros President and Chairman of the African Union, Sahil Ousmane, says that the summit was also a success for African people because when Russia wins, Africa wins.
He offered to supply all the grain that...
Спасибо. В целом же инвестиционных потоков.
I don't know why they don't give us subtitles for this part. There seems like there's something wrong with that.
In China, the 31st of Squirrel University's Summer Games were inaugurated on Friday in the city of Chengdu in the southwestern province of Sichuan. President Xi Jinping proposed a toast at the beginning of the banquet and warmly welcomed all the distinguished guests coming to China and attending the games. The brand new Dong'an Lane Sport Park Stadium with a capacity of 40,000 spectators was the opening ceremony of the games. With guests from all over the world, including more than 10,000 athletes and officials
Putin made some
from
deals in
170
Africa that were favorable
regions.
to Africa,
The
that's for
team
sure.
behind the opening ceremony took the opportunity to showcase the city's vitality, culture past, and youthful
Nice.
vigor.
Base China.
University Games will
Right,
officially
Fish
open
World
tonight.
University
Chengdu
Games.
is a famous historical
Sometimes the fucking captions.
Today, Chengdu is one of the most dynamic and happiest cities in China. I encourage you to tour our city, to experience and share firsthand the multifaceted manifestations of the Chinese path to modernization.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met with
Sometimes the
Burundian
captions are like
President
way
Evariste
behind or not showing up.
on Friday, and prize
Especially when
relations
they
that
were
the two
speaking
nations
Russian, I
have been
guess.
able to achieve together. The Xipinian arrived in Chengdu, Sichuan province early on Friday to attend the opening ceremony of the 31st summer edition of the official World University Games. The Chinese president points out that both China and Burundi are currently in a crucial stage of national development.
All the comrades in here.
和共同发展。Par la même occasion, je voudrais également vous transmettre les sincères salutations.
Important period of national development.
I appreciate this very much. China-Burundi relations have withstood vicissitudes in the international arena. The two countries are all-weather friends who share will and woe, and good partners who respect each other and work together for development. Currently, both China and Burundi are in an important period of national development. China is willing to strengthen the docking of development strategies with Burundi to seize opportunities, deepen cooperation, and achieve a higher level of mutual benefits and common development. I would like to take this opportunity to extend my
makes perfect
sincere
sense, Silver.
greetings to the Chinese people on behalf of the people of Burundi. Although the two countries are far apart, the two peoples have maintained a long-term friendship. Today I came to the beautiful Chengdu as a guest. I saw that Chengdu and Burundi have many similarities. There are beautiful valleys, rivers, and vegetation in both places, which made me feel at home.
On Friday, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Mauritanian President in Chengdu, capital city of the southwest China's Sichuan province. During that meeting, President Xi stressed that China and Mauritania should continue to be good friends, support each other, and jointly safeguard their common interests and international fairness and justice. Additionally, President Xi said China will continue to support Mauritania in pursuing a development path suited in its national circumstances and oppose external interference in Mauritania's internal affairs. Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at Telesur English, there you will be able to watch on interviews, top stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on our world's most recent events. For final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. During a press conference, Chinese government spokeswoman Mao Ning demanded the United States to withdraw the illegal and reasonable sanctions against Chinese personnel, including Chief Executive John Li Qingshu, leader of Hong Kong. For this reason, Chinese officials will not be able to participate in the APEC meeting.
U.S. illegal and unreasonable sanctions against Chinese personnel, including Chief Executive John Li Qingshu, are bullying that seriously violates basic norms of international
Remembering, of course, Parenti's talk, gangster nature of the state there. And I'm thinking about all this.
To the U.S. to the APEC meeting by citing those sanctions as a reason is another mistake, which blatantly violates the APEC rules and contravenes the U.S. commitments as the host of the meeting. China expresses its strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition to this and has made solemn complaints with the U.S.
Additionally, Mao Ning referred to Japan's interference in China's internal affairs and stressed that China's national defenses, constructions, and military activities are justified and reasonable.
The defense white paper has grossly interfered.
Yeah, I've noticed that, Silver, that
normal national defense
I mean that he was the person who carried out the coup was trained in the U.S. or something, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Tensions in the region. China strongly rejects and deplores this and has already lodged solemn complaints with the Japanese side. China's national defense, construction, and military
Yeah,
activities are
I
justified
just
and
mentioned about the
reasonable. And military
Russia,
corporations
and
sustain
also
impact
saying
goals
that it
and
would be
rely
able to
countries
provide
in
any
line with
grain that
international law and
they were
practice.
getting from
Taiwan
Ukraine.
is China's territory, and the Taiwan issue is purely an internal affair of China that brooks no interference by any external forces.
Hey Zoot,
The so-called
welcome.
military balance
How are
between
you
two sides of
today,
the Taiwan Strait is
comrade?
completely false.
And Silver, welcome as
Proposition.
well.
Japan, which bears a serious historical responsibility for its crime against the Chinese people on the Taiwan issue, should be especially careful in its words and actions with self-reflection.
Oh yeah, no, I realize we definitely don't have enough details. Have to wait and see what happens.
The leaders of the Multino soldiers who detained the democratically elected president in that African country addressed to the nation on Friday, 2 days after the military seized power. General Abdullah Manir Tishani, known as Omar, said that the countries needed to change course to ensure its preservation, and that he and the others had decided to intervene to overcome security, economic, and social challenges. In a year, through a statement read on national TV, a representative of the Copts warned on Friday against any foreign military intervention. The statement alludes to a possible rescue operation by the upset authorities.
Despite the arrangements made by the CNSP for a quick return to normal situation, some former dignitaries holed up in chancelleries in collaboration with them are in a logic of confrontation with a view to the extraction of the deposed authorities. This bellicose, dangerous and perilous attitude will have no other results than the massacre of the Nigerian population and chaos. The CNSP is therefore witnessing the national and international opinion on the consequences of any foreign military intervention.
The United Nations International Organization for Migration stated that at least 2,300 migrants left Senegal in an attempt to reach the Spain's Canary Islands in the first 8 months.
We're gonna watch a Luna Oy video here next.
About 1,100 arrived. According to the international body, it is unclear what happened to the more than 1,000 people who did not make it to Spain, and hidden that they might have died at sea, being rescued for overturned boats, or being held by the authorities. El Hadji Fall, a member of the organization Fight Against Clandestine Immigration, commented to the AP news agency that a number of boats that pick up illegal migrants to take them to Europe has increased, a matter that has become a business that some use to make a fortune. They also recorded the testimonies of Ibn Dignet, survivor of the shipwreck. Let's listen.
In comparison with past years, I really feel there are now more boats, especially since the start of Ramadan until now. There is an increase in the number of boats, and there is also an increase in the number of those who are organizing the trips and who are only trying to earn money through this business and make a fortune. There are many people who are discouraged by the kind of life they are living here and who are looking to go to Spain to find work. All of this is shocking. I lost many people when the boat capsized. I lost my friend Abdurrahmane. I lost everything. I paid money. The first time $420 and $680 the second time. I lost friends. If I want something from now on, I will work, but not from Spain, because it's hard to get there. The sea is not good. I lost everything. I lost my clothes. If I were to give advice, here it is. If a guy would like to travel to Spain, don't take a pirogue. You have to take a plane.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also use us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well.
Alright, there's Telesurf for you comrades tonight. Alright, we got one more music, and then we're gonna watch Luna Oy. This is DPRK State Narrative Chorus. Look at that.
Listen, there's
All
a
right,
good chance somebody
let's check out this Luna Oi video.
Hi, I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna Oi. This is part 3 in my series on democratic centralism. There are links
what
to
are we
parts 1
watching
and 2 in
after
the
that?
description. But to recap what we've learned so far,
Pastor
every
Volt.
group of human
Now,
beings,
this will
including
probably be the last
organizations,
thing.
communities,
So,
and governments,
what do you want to
has
watch last?
characteristics of democracy
New
as well
DPRK
as
military
characteristics
parade
of
or
centralism.
Parenti sustainable
Democracy
economy?
deals with representation of the people in making decisions and directing the group, while centralism refers to unity in thought and action in a group. Democracy and centralism mutually impact and develop one another, and both democracy and centralism can have positive and negative characteristics. Good democracy can help build good centralism by building harmony and productive unity in thought and action among group members. Good centralism can develop democracy by making sure everyone can have a voice and can comfortably place trust in a democratic system. And of course, the opposite is also true. Bad forms of democracy will degrade centralism as unity dissolves, and bad centralism can undermine democracy by putting too much power in too few hands. Marx and Engels define democracy as a system in which the will of the people guides human society through the use of elections and other democratic systems. In contrast, they pointed out that monarchies, feudalism, and bourgeois democracies are not truly democratic at all, since only a small minority wield power and influence in such societies. Marx and Engels saw democracy in all its forms as the primary driving force of humanity, as conflict between democratic demands of the majority
All right, viewers,
contradicted with
cast
the
your
tyranny of
vote. Do you
powerful
want to
minority
watch Parenti on the
leading to class
sustainable
struggle,
economy,
which
creating
changed
the
and developed
sustainable
human society
economy?
throughout
That's what his
history.
talk is
Marx
called.
and Engels
Or do
understood
you want to
the
watch
power
that
of
new
democracy
DPRK
and knew that a
military
working class
parade that
revolution would
Russian
have to be
diplomat just
democratic in
witnessed?
nature in order to be successful.
Cast
They
your
laid the
vote in
philosophical
chat
foundation
now.
of studying democracy through the lens of dialectical materialism, which paved the way for the development of democratic centralism as we know it today. This brings us to Vladimir Lenin, who was the first to define the philosophical concept of democratic centralism based on the groundwork laid by Marx and Engels in their analysis of democracy. Like Marx and Engels, Lenin was a scientific socialist. This means that he used dialectical materialism as a philosophical framework for fulfilling the mission of the working class in dismantling capitalism and building communism. Scientific socialism upholds democracy as the basis for successfully overthrowing capitalism, and Lenin fleshed out these ideas in both theory and practice. In The Revolutionary Proletariat and the Right of Nations to Self-Determination, written in 1915, Lenin wrote,
"The proletariat cannot be victorious except through democracy, by giving full effect to democracy and by linking with each step of its struggle democratic demands formulated in the most resolute terms."
Lenin, like Marx and Engels, considered the masses of the people to be the makers of history, not any heroic or divine individuals. Under capitalism, just as with previous forms of class society like feudalism, the majority of people have to struggle against a minority ruling class. This struggle between classes, based on a desire for increased and improved democracy, is what has driven human society through every stage of development, from slave societies to feudal societies and on into the current stage of capitalism. Through all the history of class struggle, democracy has always been both a battle slogan and a revolutionary goal for the oppressed classes.
Evening,
What
comrade?
distinguishes capitalism from previous forms of society is the nature of class division. In previous society, power and other characteristics were distributed among a variety of classes, including monarchs, slaves, peasants, nobles, religious leaders, merchants, craftsmen, and so on. Capitalism has reduced the complexity of class structure, so that today the vast majority of humans compose one class, the working class, and a very tiny minority of individuals, the capitalist class, control society. If the working class could manage to overthrow the capitalist class entirely and build a democratic system that represents the will of the working class as a whole, then class struggle will be eliminated forever, and humanity will finally have an opportunity to build a society which is truly democratic in nature. The struggle towards achieving that goal can only be achieved through socialism. And socialists must do all we can to put power in the hands of the working class. Lenin put it very simply in an article called All Power to the Soviets, published in 1917.
Democracy is the rule of the majority.
But it should be pointed out that this rule of the majority doesn't mean oppression of marginalized minorities. All working-class citizens must have a voice and enjoy freedom in order for a society to be called a real democracy.
And there
According
must be
to Lenin,
protections
an organization
for
or
minorities.
society must have the following of 4 characteristics in order to be truly democratic. Equality of all citizens under the law. Political freedom for all citizens. Decisions made by a majority of all citizens. Citizens decide by vote, which is the essence of peaceful, pure democracy. If these 4 criteria are met, then a society can be said to be truly democratic, according to Lenin. Lenin developed this criteria for a true democracy through his revolutionary work in Russia, not just through theoretical hypothesizing, but through practice as a revolutionary leader and organizer. But Lenin also knew that in order for democracy to be used to empower the working class and fight capitalism, it has to take a certain form. Lenin argued that in our current states of development and material conditions, in order to enable the working class to overthrow capitalism and build towards communism, democracy must take the form of a government. So Lenin believed that the task of communist revolutionists was to develop a form of government which would give the working class access to true democracy while still being able to fight against capitalism, imperialism, fascism, and many other threats to the revolution. Lenin called the form of government which the working class would use to fight capitalism and build democracy and power for the working class socialist democracy or proletarian democracy. Lenin famously described the socialist democracy as a dictatorship of the proletariat, but this term is often highly misunderstood. When Lenin talks
Yeah,
about
it
the
is.
dictatorship of the
Especially
proletariat,
when you're
he
first
doesn't mean we
getting
should
into
have a
talking to
tyrannical or
people about it.
authoritarian government. He was simply inverting the idea of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, aka the bourgeois democracy. As Marx and Engels had explained, in the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class holds all the power. Therefore, a small minority have power over the vast majority of workers. The dictatorship of the proletariat, on the other hand, would put power in the hands of the vast majority of people in society. The working class would have power over the capitalist class, which would help society to begin fulfilling the 4 criteria of a true democracy. Let's compare bourgeois democracy with socialist democracy, one criterion at a time. Equality of all citizens under the law. Under a bourgeois democracy, there is no equality of all citizens under the law. Capitalists can hire expensive lawyers, pay off politicians through lobbying and bribes, and gain all kinds of legal protections through corporate structures. Meanwhile,
Need to get
workers
back
have
to
very
reading
few
Luna's
resources to
book.
protect
She helped me
themselves,
learn so
and
much.
bourgeois
I've
legal
been on a learning
institutions
arc,
offer them
which is
fewer
why I like
protections
it
and
here.
benefits. A socialist
Glad to
democracy
hear
would
that,
truly
BB.
protect all citizens equally.
Glad
Every
to hear
citizen,
that
no
there's
matter how poor,
that
should
you
have
find
the
this
same
conducive
protections
to a
and
learning
benefits under the
environment.
law.
That is what we're
Political
definitely trying to
freedom for all
create here.
citizens. Under a bourgeois democracy,
And don't
capitalists
forget
have far
about
more
Iskra
freedom than the
books as
working
well.
class. For example, look at freedom of speech. Capitalists have far more of a voice in capitalist
The Peace,
society,
Land, and
where they
Bread
can own
journals
entire
are really
media
good.
institutions and pay to have their propaganda disseminated to millions upon millions of people. Workers have much smaller voices and also lack access to other basic freedoms,
And if
like
you've
freedom
never
from
read
poverty,
Stalin as
preventable
well, he
disease,
can
and
be
houselessness.
super
A socialist
easy to
democracy would give an
understand,
equal
like
voice to everyone,
when it
and
comes to
every member of
explaining
society would
Leninist
enjoy the
concepts.
same freedoms and benefits with protection from the government. Nobody would have more freedom than anybody else just because they are more wealthy or they own private property. Decisions made by a majority of all citizens. In a bourgeois democracy, the capitalist class controls society. Elections are illusionary in nature. They exist to make workers feel like they have a voice, when in reality the capitalist class controls all aspects of government. The working class may have some token input, but the working class will never be given the power to make any decision, which would jeopardize the power of the capitalist class. A socialist democracy would allow every member of society to have an equal voice in decision-making. Nobody would be excluded from participating in collective decision-making,
Well,
just
we will
because
have
they
to
are poor
change
or
that with
otherwise
this channel then,
marginalized.
probably.
And the government would be truly be in the hands of majority of society, the proletariat.
Imagine
Citizens
we'll do some
decide by
Stalin
vote,
pretty
which is the
soon.
essence of peaceful, pure democracy. As I've already said, elections in bourgeois democracies are not real. Decisions aren't really made by popular vote, and representatives don't really represent most people. Capitalists control and rig elections in any number of ways, through spending vast fortunes on political propaganda, through gerrymandering and redistricting, through lobbying, campaign contributions, and other sorts of bribes, through corporate media, and in a million other ways. A socialist democracy would empower workers through more meaningful forms of democracy. It should not be permitted to bribe politicians and political leaders in any way, and every citizen, no matter how poor or marginalized, should have the same access to elections and other democratic structures as everyone else. Once full socialism is established, then a society can then begin transitioning towards a stateless, classless society, which is a dream of all communists. Unfortunately, getting to full socialism is a very long process, one that takes many generations. And so far, no country on earth, not the Soviet Union, not Vietnam, not Cuba, not any other country, has yet achieved full socialism. Lenin knew that it wouldn't be possible to simply throw the socialism switch, especially in Russia, where centuries of rule by the Tsar left the Russian people poor, uneducated, and indoctrinated into reactionary belief and ideology in countless other ways. Building a socialist democracy will be a very difficult task for any nation, and a lot of mistakes will be made along the way, and this was definitely true in Russia. For instance, Lenin knew that the Russian people would need to be educated about democracy. Previous ideas about democracy and self-determination, which were established and disseminated by the capitalist class, would need to be fought against and negated. In Russia, that meant fighting against Tsarist indoctrination. In former colonies like Vietnam, that has meant undoing decades of colonialist propaganda. In capitalist nations, that would mean fighting against ideas of bourgeois democracy, which hold back the working class and hinder the development of socialism. Today, just as in Lenin's time, there are many misperceptions about democracy, just as there are misperceptions about socialism. A lot of people fall for capitalist lies. They believe that bourgeois democracy is good for the people, and they fall for the scam of capitalist-controlled elections, thinking that their votes actually matter in the bourgeois democracy, when, in reality, capitalists actually control the agenda of society behind the scenes. Today, workers in bourgeois democracies are also led to believe that since socialist and former socialist nations like the USSR, Vietnam, and Cuba have never been perfect, and since we have never achieved full socialism, we are complete failures and liars. For instance, a lot of Western leftists argue that Vietnamese communists are lying about wanting to build communism, since we have yet to achieve a stateless, classless society, and because our road towards socialism has been very difficult, with many mistakes and setbacks along the way. The expectation is that we just need to push the socialism button and all the problems will disappear. They don't realize how many problems we face and how many internal and external threats we have that make it very difficult to achieve our dream of building socialism. The problem here is that they treat socialism and democracy as an idea rather than a practical processes of development. Lenin, however, was quite aware that building towards full socialism and create a true socialist democracy would be very difficult. Socialist democracy is a brand new form of government, something that humans have never tried to build before in all of history. And it will take a lot of experimentation and failure to achieve it. We can't simply think of socialism and democracy as utopian ideas, but rather as pragmatic systems which must be built over time through scientific development, which unfortunately includes a lot of trial and error. Building socialist democracy is a process of constantly developing theories and then applying them creatively in real life in our struggle for socialist revolution. Of course, this struggle has to be systemic and organized. There has to be an underlying framework for developing theories and testing them in the real world. We have to have a shared set of values, principles, and characteristics, which we apply as we build towards socialism. And this is exactly what Lenin succeeded in developing in his formulation of the philosophical concept of democratic centralism. Before we dig deeper into Lenin's formulation of democratic centralism, it's important to understand that democratic centralism actually has a few different definitions. First, there is a philosophical concept of democratic centralism. This is simply the recognition that democracy and centralism exist in all human groups, and that democracy and centralism have a dialectical relationship with one another. They mutually impact and develop each other over time. The philosophical conception of democratic centralism is universally applicable to all human groups. You can use this philosophical framework to study and analyze all human groups of all forms and sizes. For instance, you can do a democratic centralist analysis of a family, or of a political party, or of a government, or of the entirety of human civilization. You can study the democratic centralistic properties of not just communist parties, but of fascists, of liberals, of monarchies, of any group of human beings. This is the philosophical foundation from which Lenin formulated
I
as
think
a
right
more
now we have
specific
8
set of
ducks,
democratic centralist
but
guidelines for
3 of them
political
are
parties.
going to be
You can
given
think of
away.
this democratic centralist guidelines as a philosophical framework to help guide communist political parties toward revolution, and then to help communist governments
One
build
of the
toward a fully
ducklings is a
socialist
drake,
democracy.
so we
As we
can't
build
have
towards
2
socialist
drakes.
democracy, step by step, we can use these guidelines of democratic centralism to ensure that our democratic forms and our
2 drakes
centralist
can be
unity
bad news.
mutually develop one another to make our organizations and government as strong as possible. Finally, at the most specific level, there are specific implementations of democratic centralism, which are adopted by specific communist parties, governments, and other organizations all around the world. These can vary pretty widely from place to place and over time. For instance, the democratic centralism of Vietnam has changed significantly over time. At first, way back in the 1920s and 30s, there were various communist parties, unions, and organizations which had different implementations of democratic centralism. Over time, these groups came together to form what we now call the Communist Party of Vietnam. The democratic centralism in Vietnam has also changed significantly from wartime to the subsidizing model era, to the early Đổi mới reforms, to today's socialism-oriented market economy era. Vietnam's democratic centralism today differs significantly from the implementation of democratic centralism in China, Cuba, and other socialist nations.
If you find the ideas presented in this video interesting or of value, might we recommend Luna's translation of the Vietnamese curriculum on dialectical materialism? It's available now at banyanhouse.org/shop. There's a link in the description. Thank you for your time. We now return you to the program.
So remember, there are 3 levels of democratic centralism. The most general philosophical framework of democratic centralism, which can be used to analyze any group of human beings. The democratic centralist guidelines used to build and guide communist parties and societies. And the very specific implementation of democratic centralism used in specific organizations and nations across time and around the world. Okay, with all this in mind, let's take a look at how Lenin began developing the philosophy of democratic centralism in earnest by applying his views on democracy to the material conditions of Russia at that time in order to educate Russian proletariat. One of the biggest problems Lenin knew he had to resolve was the contradiction between democracy and centralism in organizing and developing the Russian working class path to socialism. Lenin believed that many philosophers and leaders were diverging from the basic principles of Marxism. For instance, the German social democrat Edward Bernstein sought to collaborate with the capitalists and believed that socialism could be achieved through reform within a bourgeois democracy. Other popular philosophers who Lenin believed were misleading the working class included Ernst Mach, Karl Kautsky, and Mikhail Bakunin. There were also other large factions such as the Mensheviks who wanted to abandon Marxist proletarian revolution in favor of other divergent philosophies. Lenin wanted to unite the working class through principles of Marxism, but he wanted to achieve this unity through democratic means. In order to achieve this, Lenin sought to build a Marxist political party which could lay the groundwork and help to educate the masses, not in an authoritarian, overly centralized way, but in a way that dialectically develops centralized unity alongside democratic principles. As Lenin wrote in the original version of the article, the immediate task of the Soviet government.
Freedom of discussion, unity of action. This is what we must strive to achieve. Beyond the bounds of unity of action, there must be the broadest and freest discussion and condemnation of all steps, decisions, and tendencies that we regard as harmful. Only through such discussions, resolutions, and protests can the real public opinion of our party be formed. Only on this condition shall we be a real party, always able to express its opinion and finding the right way to convert a definitely formed opinion into the decisions of its next Congress.
Lenin realized that the Russian Revolution held great historical importance. The Russian people were at a crossroads in deciding how they would develop the very first socialist nation on earth, and nobody knew what ideas would work in practice and which would fail. In order to test theory against reality, Russian communists would have to have an organizational structure and a philosophical framework which would offer as much participation from the masses as possible while staying true to the principles of democracy and socialist struggle, first laid out by Marx and Engels, and they would have to do this in a society which still had a powerful bourgeois class and many reactionary tendencies left over from centuries of czarist feudalism. as Lenin said in a speech at the Congress of Economic Councils in 1918.
We have begun this historical epic, an epic in which we are breaking up the discipline of capitalist society in a country which is still bourgeois. And we are proud that all politically conscious workers, absolutely all the toiling peasants, are everywhere helping this destruction. An epic in which the people voluntarily, on their own initiative, are becoming aware that they must not rely on instructions from above, but on the instructions of their own living experience. This is a task of enormous difficulty, but it is also a thankful one, because only when we solve it in practice shall we have driven the last nail into the coffin of capitalist society which we are burying.
So Lenin believed that the people must guide their own revolution. It was, therefore, the task of the Socialist Party to give power and a voice to the people while educating the working class and raising class consciousness. Thus, the party must have a dialectical relationship with the working class. The party can't simply rule the working class from above, nor can the party simply follow the working class along reactionary lines. The party and the people must develop one another, and the way that they would do this was through the process of democratic centralism. This required a great deal of discipline, theoretical knowledge, and practical experience. If the party and revolutionary leaders become too autocratic and commandist, forcing decisions upon the working class against their will, then democracy will fail and the revolution will collapse, possibly becoming a dictatorship. If, on the other hand, centralized unity and harmony in theory and practice are neglected, then the working class will splinter and fracture into infighting, giving opportunists the opportunity to take advantage of democracy to put the bourgeoisie back in charge of society. There is no specific prescription of democratic centralism which anyone can follow at any given time. You can't just follow a checklist of rules and regulations in applying democratic centralism to the development of human organizations. Instead, revolutionists have to constantly analyze the current situation and make corrections, recognize mistakes and failures, and look for opportunities to foster the mutual development of both democracy and centralized harmony. That said, Lenin did offer some basic principles of democratic centralism, which he presented at the Second Congress of the Communist International. The participants at this Congress wanted to build an international alliance of socialist revolutions, and Lenin proclaimed that
parties joining the Communist International must be built on the principle of democratic centralism.
Lenin's suggested principles thus became the charter of the Second Congress of the Communist International. The actual document is pretty long, so I will just give you a brief summary of each principle of democratic centralism. And I will link to the full document in the description if you want to give it a read. But before we begin, remember, there is a difference between these guidelines for the implementation of democratic centralism for communist parties and the more universal philosophical concept of democratic centralism. So don't get confused. The principles of democratic centralism for communist parties, which Lenin laid out in the Second Congress of the Communist International, are specific guidelines for the application of democratic centralist philosophy to the organization of Communist Party. Okay, with that being said, here are the 10 principles of democratic centralism from the Charter of the Second Congress of the Communist International for communist parties. Number 1, the grassroots party organizations are the organizational core of the party. This is very important. It means that workers must control the party at the ground level. The centralized national body must subservient to local grassroots organizational levels. This gives the structure of a democratic centralist party sort of inverted pyramid shape, where grassroots local organizations are the core basis of power in the party. Number 2, all higher organizations must be elected, are responsible for reporting on their work, and can be dismissed. This one is pretty obvious. No high position should simply be appointed or selected arbitrarily. All positions and organizational structures should be elected, with the ultimate power of voting held at the local grassroots level. Number 3, the party is an organization of independent workers who are educated on social democracy. The party is not a special class of people. It should be composed of workers, and these workers must be educated in the principles of scientific socialism, including democratic centralism. Number 4, the autonomy of all communist parties must be recognized. No nation's communist party should have the power over the communist party of any other nation. The communist parties should be autonomous and allowed to build socialism based on their own material conditions. Number 5. All party members must eliminate the competition for territory between different parties and overcome the fear of other parties. This is especially important in the earlier stages of revolution, when various communist parties will no doubt exist in different regions and cities. These parties must find ways to work together and, ideally, come together in unity over time while combating reactionary and opportunistic parties and individuals which seek to restore power of the capitalist class. Number 6, there must be organizational unity, and at the same time, there should be purely ideological struggles between different social democratic ideological trends within a party. They can't.
Yeah. Part 5. Yeah, part 5 is key, and part 6, I would say, is key as well. This part. Wait, one thing I want to show you, because check this out. Once we're done with red skin, white masks, this is going to be the work we're going to be reading right here. Even probably the ideological work is essential. So that should be interesting.
Trends within a party. There can't just be one single ideological
Sort of
prescription
related to
which all
number 6
members
there.
must follow blindly. Members of the party must be allowed to hold ideological differences
And also
freely
to
voice their
one of the
opinions
earlier
and
numbers
concerns
she
in
mentioned
party
as well,
meetings and when solving
about
problems, which must be balanced with the goal of
both the
developing
Communist
centralized
Party
unity and harmony
ideologically
in
inspiring
ideology
the
and
people.
action over time, and eliminating bourgeois influence and sabotage within the party.
Yeah,
Number
ideological
7,
work
clearly
would include
identify the
political
causes of
education for
contradictions
sure.
among ideological change within the party, because it is a necessary condition for a healthy development of the party in order to educate the working class and avoid errors in policies. Just as it is important for different ideological positions to be held, it is also important for the party to have an introspective awareness of these different tendencies. We can't just pretend ideological differences don't exist. Instead, we have to work tirelessly to understand the nature of ideological differences in order to negate internal contradictions as smoothly and harmoniously as possible. Number 8, in ideological activities, it is necessary to point out which issues are in agreement, which issues are still in disagreement, and to what extent. The party must get rid of the old habits, such as to accuse other people without sincerely and thoroughly analyzing dissenting opinions. It is easy for members of the party to opportunistically attack one another and to arrange themselves into factions. Some members may try to build their own personal power base and sow division within the party for their own personal gain. This must be strictly prohibited, and disagreement must be worked out in good faith with the ultimate goal of building unity and harmony in the party. Number 9, provide party members with sufficient documents on party activities so that party members can independently study the disagreement in the process of party decision making. This is pretty simple and pretty important. Party activity must be documented, and documentation must be disseminated to all members so that everyone can know what's going on at all times. Number 10, the party must discuss as widely and openly as possible all the issues and resolutions. Party members must have a complete self-conscious and critical attitude towards the party's resolutions. The party must create conditions for party members and workers' organizations to understand and to express their agreement or disagreement with the party's situations and resolutions via discussion, newspaper, group meetings, and etc. Nobody should simply blindly follow the party. The party's action and decisions should be constantly criticized by the membership to identify mistakes, clarify positions, and maintain an efficient path towards socialism. Okay, so this should give you an idea of the guidelines Lenin suggested for the implementation of democratic centralism for communist parties. Lenin based his principles on the philosophical foundation of democratic centralist philosophy with the goal.
Just for a second. Revolutionary must have a big heart, after all. That means don't be a fucking
maintaining
dick.
the freedom to discuss and disagree within the party.
The core, as I mentioned all the time on this channel, you know, the core of Marxism, all the philosophy, all of this theory, all of this shit exists for the simple reason that the core of Marxism is to end all oppression and all exploitation of human by human. That's the core, right? And all the philosophy and all the theory and all this other shit has arose in order to try and materialize that core. That is what we call, or what lots of Marxists in the past and works you might come across call the essence of Marxism.
While simultaneously developing unity in action and ideology over time. In a well-unified party, the ideological struggle must not be used to divide the party, nor to destroy the unity and action of the proletariat. Instead, disagreement and ideological struggle should be used to unify the party and the working class and to develop democratic structures. This is very important to understand because disagreement and debate and internal divisions can easily be used by opportunists to build their own personal power, to undermine the proletarian mission of building communism, and to develop splinter groups which seek to disrupt and sabotage the working class from within. You see this a lot with Western leftists who use debate tactics and sophistry to sow chaos and division within the working class. The goal of democratic centralism is to elevate disagreement and debate so that it positively develops the party and the working class as a whole. It's entirely possible for disagreement and criticism
That wasn't the
to be
quote I
constructive.
had, by the way.
After all,
I
we
got a
need to be
different
able
one.
to identify flaws, mistakes, and weaknesses so that we can fix them and make our revolution stronger. This is why Lenin believed that disagreement and freedom of dissent within the party is so important. But if disagreement and criticism are used cynically and opportunistically, then they can quickly become destructive. So the goal of socialists must be to use democratic centralist strategies and tactics to use disagreement, dissent, and critique to the betterment of the revolution, while restricting people from using disagreement and dissent as weapons against the working class. In Lenin's time, there were many people who were opposed to the principle of democratic centralism. Some of these critics claimed that Lenin was too anarchistic and not centralistic enough. For example, in 1917, the bourgeois provisional government of Russia was against the seizure of land by the peasantry. The provisional government wanted land distribution to be worked out through compromise between peasants and landlords. Lenin strictly opposed this and supported the seizure of land and redistribution directly to peasants without compromising with landlords. Lenin wanted power in the hands of local peasants, and he believed that this would be the best basis for a national government which could deal with issues of land and justice for peasants. Other critics claimed the opposite, that democratic centralism was an authoritarian philosophy which sacrificed democracy at the expense of centralism. One such faction which accused democratic centralism of being too authoritarian were the Federalists. The Federalists call for a system which is purely democratic without centralism. Basically, the Federalists call for quote-unquote decentralized system for decision-making, in which participants could voluntarily submit to the system, but they could leave at any time. The idea is that everyone should be able to enter or leave the system at any time and for any reason, and that centralism could thus be eliminated altogether, leaving a pure democracy. The mistake here is pretending that centralism is somehow inherently bad or even something that can and should be avoided altogether. The fact is, centralism is present in all human groups. Even federalist systems have to have some degree of centralism, or they simply fall apart into countless splinter groups with no cohesion whatsoever. So, opposition to the very concept of centralism is really just individualism. Democratic centralism takes the more realistic and practical position that centralism will always exist in any group of human beings, and that we should therefore try to understand the role of centralism plays in society and how centralism interacts with democracy. As revolutionary movements develop and advance, the dynamics between democracy and centralism will constantly be changing, and it's the job of every revolutionary to study the relationship between democracy and centralism and to try to constantly develop and improve both democracy and centralism in the road towards socialism. To fight against false accusations of authoritarianism, Lenin wrote in his first draft of the immediate tasks of the Soviet government.
Those who oppose democratic centralism always suggest autonomism or federalism as opposing alternatives, and consider those to be a solution in opposition to the instability of democratic centralism. But in fact, democratic centralism does not eliminate nor exclude anarchist autonomism. On the contrary, it includes the necessity to have autonomism internally. The same is true of federalism. Democratic centralism could be applied within federalism, and federalism does not inherently oppose democratic centralism. In a true democratic regime, federalism is just a transitional step towards true democratic centralism. The federal system does not in the slightest contradict with democratic centralism. In a true democratic regime, federalism is often only a transitional step towards genuine democratic centralism. There's no bigger mistake than mixing democratic centralism with bureaucracy and dogmatism. Now, our immediate task is to practice democratic centralism in our economy and to uphold and allow local groups to develop their own ideas and express their own ideas as we move toward a common goal.
Surprisingly,
And then
Lenin was not
unfortunately,
opposed
that's
to
the
most of the
mistake
basic
the
principles of
USSR
federalism,
made in the
especially in
end.
the early stages of revolution.
Largely,
The principles of
the largest
democratic
internal
centrism
mistake.
uphold autonomy and grassroots organization as vitally important. So Lenin did not really disagree with the Federalists as much as the Federalists said he did. However, one way in which Lenin strongly disagreed with Federalists was their lack of adherence to socialism. Lenin believed that the only reason socialists should have a revolution and build a democratic centralist government to begin with was to build towards socialism and socialist democracy. The Federalists, on the other hand, did not believe in any one unifying goal or vision for society, and Lenin believed that this gave opportunists and capitalist agents the opportunity to disrupt the revolution and seize back control of society. Since centralism was discounted and disregarded and even denied by the Federalists, there was no explicit ambition to build towards harmony, unity, and centralization of thought and action. Without a centralized goal for eliminating capitalism and building socialism, the working class was splintered into countless factions. Democratic centralism is simply a process of uniting disparate factions together under the common cause of overthrowing capitalism and building towards a socialist democracy, in which every single person has a voice within a self-determining government. In the earliest stages of revolution, principles of democratic centralism must be used to guide parties towards growth and acceptance among the working class. Disparate parties must then find ways to work together and merge together over time until enough cohesion and power is developed to seize control over the state, from the capitalist class to institute the dictatorship of the proletariat. Once the dictatorship of the proletariat has been established, the principle of democratic centralism must then be applied both in the organization and operation of the whole socialist government, the entire political system, and also in the management of the nation's socio-economic processes, with the ambition of building towards socialist democracy. I should note that no nation on earth has yet made it all the way to socialist democracy. The Soviet Union never fulfilled all of Lenin's criteria of democracy. Vietnam today is still in the process of building towards socialist democracy, and we have a long way to go. It's actually very difficult to build a socialist democracy because of all the threats and challenges faced by the capitalist imperialist world. I have a few videos on many of the challenges and setbacks Vietnam has faced, but suffice to say, it's really hard to build a fully functioning socialist democracy. If it were easy, I'm sure someone would have done it by now, and if you think it's easy, then I hope you will stand up and lead your people to full socialism and show us how it's done. Anyway, even if you disagree with the principles of socialism, communism, Marxism, Leninism, and so on, you can still use the philosophical framework of democratic centralism to analyze governments, political parties, and other groups of human beings. That's because democratic centralism is, at the core, simply the recognition that democracy and centralism exist in all groups of human beings, and that democracy and centralism mutually impact and develop one another over time. As Lenin said, democratic centralism is not a principle that exists exclusively for communists. It is, in fact, a recognition of basic fact about reality which any group could apply in developing their goals. Okay, so now you have a basic understanding of Lenin's formulation of democratic centralism and the application of democratic centralism for communist parties. In our next episode, we will take a look at how democratic centralism has been applied specifically here in Vietnam. I will tell you about the history of democratic centralism and how it is applied in our Communist Party, in our government, and in other organizations such as Labor Union, Women's Union, and the National Front, as well as some mistakes that we've made and challenges we face today in developing democracy and centralized harmony as we build towards a socialist democracy. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Yeah, Luna's videos are definitely
The
great.
original Italian and German variations of fascism was a political phenomenon that made a revolutionary appeal with.
Now before that goes, let me just pin this because this is what's going to be next. Pin that for you now. Okay, GMO, thanks for joining. Here's a link to the Luna Oi video we just watched, comrades.
Long live the People's Revolution!
Have a good night, comrade.
Yeah, see ya.
And then, here, I'll show you this. This is the quote that I mentioned near the beginning. This is Comrade Kim Jong-il on democracy. For collective discussion to be intensified, democracy must be given full play. If democracy is not displayed, and the subjective views and arbitrariness of individual senior officials pass unchallenged at party meeting, it is impossible to find correct solutions to problems and achieve success in work. For senior party officials to throw their weight around runs counter to the organizational principle of our party. A senior party official can by no means represent the party committee. Chief secretaries of provincial, city, and county party committees cannot represent the respective party committees, nor can factory party secretaries represent their party committees. Party secretary is tantamount to a chairperson presiding over a party meeting. They are a person who executes the decisions of the party committee, like other members of the committee. The party committee must encourage all its members to freely advance creative ideas for the carrying out of the party's policy. In particular, must accept all the creative ideas offered by the members who work on production sites, so that the will of the masses can be incorporated into decisions it makes on all the problems it discusses. And then I just wanted to also point out that right here, if you're wondering about DPRK itself, all you have to do, see that on Article 5. They do actually say that in Article 5 of their constitution, this is their socialist constitution, which was passed, I can't remember what date this was actually. I mean, it's been changed many times since then, so this is 2016. So this one does say, Article 5, it does say all state organs, which, as I always point out to comrades, state organs would be completely independent of all party organs. So the WPK and the other political parties in DPRK. There's a social democratic one and there's a religious followers one. So all the parties and state organs are formed and function on the principle of democratic centralism. There we go. Wanted to share that with you, comrades. And finally, we're gonna watch this Michael Parenti's Creating the Sustainable Economy to top off the night. Might throw on a game while we do this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Betsy Alice, and I'm a member of UUs for a Just Economic Community. We're that small, feisty group that has been working actively for economic justice for well over a decade.
Parenti poll, though.
Michael Parenti represents a long list of very distinguished and amazing thinkers and activists that we have brought to GA year after year. Michael Parenti is an historian and social scientist. Parenti. Excuse me, Parenti, the author of 18 books about social and political issues.
Someone
His
said
19th
something to her,
book called
really?
Super Patriotism is about to come out within the next month. Some of the books are, you probably know about Democracy
Right,
for
there's
the
a poll
Few
in
and To
chat.
Kill a Nation. Michael is the author of those books. He knows history and he knows democracy.
I would have to be
And
fair.
he's been worried about our democracy for the few for a long time, and writing and explaining the underlying structures that have contributed to the erosion of our democracy. His latest book, The Assassination of Julius Caesar, which is going to be out there for sale, was nominated last fall for a Pulitzer Prize. This book tells the compelling story of
Why is there
popular
even a no
resistance
on
against
this poll?
entrenched power, wealth, and corruption
Right?
during the late
It's
Roman
a little game we
Republic.
play with every Parenti
Sounds
dog.
eerily familiar, doesn't it? Today, he will bring lessons from history from that time to our current global economy and how citizens and governments alike can help shape a more sustainable world. We are very honored to bring this distinguished writer and thinker to you. Let's give a warm welcome to Michael.
Thank you. I want to thank the Unitarian Universalists for a just economic community for bringing me here today. Those of you who are planning to ask me at the end of this talk, yes, but what do we do about it? Then let me say right now, come work for the Unitarian Universalists for Just Economic Community. It's an organization that fights against economic injustice and for all forms of social justice. They educate, they engage and activate people. Both Unitarian Universalists and even others have been known to be activated by them. And I would encourage you to get involved by joining
Juche gang
and by
or
making a
true
contribution.
Juche gang members or social
What
justice
I'm
warriors.
I'm going to talk about a subject that really, I'm not going to talk about, there's been some confusion. I couldn't find out what my talk was supposed to be today. I finally just heard what it's supposed to be. But what I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to talk about a subject that really consumes many people.
Can't be a member of the Juche gang if you're not for the liberation of everyone.
Life. It's an intoxicant. It's something that's more important than anything else. They will kill for it. I'm going to talk about wealth. And I'm going to talk about class. Now, class, you usually can't on the left, the American left, you can't talk about class. You can talk about class like upper middle, upper, lower, a status, a group, an income level, and that sort of thing. What you can't talk about is class as a dynamic, class as a relationship to class power and social power. That's what I want to talk about, class and wealth. Well, what is wealth? What is wealth? I mean, we're all interested in it, so where does it come from and what is it? Wealth has two basic sources, that's aside from its culturally defined dimensions. First, there's the natural resources of the planet, of the environment. That's the great basic source of wealth. The land, the fruits of the land and the forests, the subterranean resources, the mineral deposits and other rich deposits, the resources from the sea, salt, fish, kelp, the sun's energy. These are all sources, if harnessed and gathered, that become wealth. The second source is human labor. There's really no natural resource that automatically leaps into our mouths, certainly none that automatically leaps into our wallets or pockets. Even food gathering in a very lush, fertile community requires labor, the labor of gathering.
Last chance.
Labor, then, is the vital other ingredient. And labor adds use value to resources, making them accessible, making them consumable, and therefore making them marketable. Labor also adds market value. It transforms, for instance, what transforms a useless tree, and a tree is useless. I mean, a tree can be precious, it's beautiful, it's part of our survival, our health and environment, but for the market, it's useless, unless it's on a property that enhances the value of the property. Someone sells you this and says, look, you got this beautiful oak tree here too,
4 out of 6 people.
Yeah, we added $1,000 to the house just for that tree.
Which means 2 said no.
But generally, what transforms a useless tree into a commodity that you can sell is the labor that goes into harvesting it, transporting it into lumber.
That's a prize, right?
Now, lumber itself is another marketable commodity, of course. That's a source of profit. And then transforming that lumber into furniture, all the labor that goes into that, and all the labor that goes into advertising and selling it and transporting it and bringing it to your house. Where do you want it, lady? And putting it down. All of that makes this, is what gives value to that tree. It's the labor. In food gathering and hunting and even early horticultural societies, there was not much opportunity to accumulate wealth. I mean, if you're a Native American Indian, you might want to own 2, 3
Too
horses.
brave optimist, or maybe
but
they've
you
already
couldn't own
watched this.
200. You couldn't take care of them all.
That is
you wouldn't have any reason for that. There was a rough equality of life in early food gathering and horticultural societies. There was a place for everybody at the fireplace. There was a communal table.
So you're probably on to
If
something
there was
with
abundance,
that analysis.
it was shared by all, more or less. I mean, maybe the hunter who killed the buffalo got the first choice cut or something, but everybody, there was food pretty much for everybody. If there was scarcity, if the herds disappeared, if the crops failed, if there was hunger, that too was shared by all. This is what was called primitive communism by some. By late horticultural societies, by the time you develop agriculture and surpluses and such, larger tracts of land are cultivated, towns and settlements, larger concentrations of populations in abundant valleys, trade develops, and wealth accumulates. And we witness a very strange and unfortunate phenomenon. That is, those with a surplus abundance, instead of sharing, become more possessive. Surplus and accumulation.
See, this is something that First Nations people argue isn't the case for every single society everywhere.
Large herds
sometimes Marx makes
larger
it sound like would happen.
And larger herds.
Because as we point
And
out,
to make sure they can keep them,
First Nations
they
people
hire bands
existed
of retainers
where they
to
were
protect
for
what they
thousands
have
of
from
years
the
without
dispossessed.
that relationship
beginnings
ever
of the state.
emerging in
the
many,
beginnings
many different
of
nations.
class society.
Not in every nation,
So
of
in
course.
advanced horticultural societies, they also do something else. They use force and violence to enlist other people into the quotidian drudgery, into the toil of their plantations, their estates, their mines, and such. These other people are slaves. And the slaves create wealth through their labor by creating all of this stuff and consuming but a bare subsistence of it. Well, so class society, class conflict, these are, as I say, they're forbidden terms in U.S. political culture, even among many who pretend to be on the left. You're not going to hear too much of that. But thinking of class as more than just a sociological category or an income category, as I said, lower middle, upper middle, all that stuff, thinking of class as a dynamic interrelationship having to do with wealth. Class, in that sense, is not just a category or a status, it's a social relationship. There's no such thing as a class in isolation. You can't talk about slaves without talking about slave holders and masters. You can't talk about lords without talking about vassals and serfs. You can't talk about corporate bosses without talking about workers and corporate employees. And what distinguishes each of them in each case is their relationship to a third factor. What distinguishes the few who own and the many who work for those who own, what distinguishes them is their relationship to this third factor, which is the means of production. That is, to the wealth, to the state power, to the land, the mines, the mills, the goods, the services. There are those who own things, and there are those who work for those who own things, who have nothing else, so they sell
commitment,
their
or
labor
just
power.
like a different
That's
ideological,
most of us. That's
different
what we
like
gotta
an
do. We gotta go
ideological
find a
idea
job
that
or a
was,
profession or
you know,
something like that. If
in
we
that
plan to
society. Whereas
pay the rent,
in the West,
whatever.
for whatever reason, where you had that happen, it was like
now capital
individualism,
comes in two forms. There's both
individualism
productive
like
capital,
emerged for
that's
some
the
reason
land, the
or
mines,
another,
the mills,
right?
all that stuff. And then there's the material component of production. I mean, that is the material component of production. I just
Which,
mentioned.
I mean, we can
And then
imagine
there's
probably the
financial
most
capital.
primitive form of individualism
The goal
was the
of the
individual
modern
who was lucky
capitalist,
enough to
the modern
have this
transnational
surplus
corporation,
at that time,
the goal
wherever
of that
it was.
organization is not
And this idea
productive
spread like
capital
crazy, of
or
course, to other
productivity
people
as such. The goal is financial
who were in
accumulation.
similar positions.
And if maximizing your financial communication means intensifying your productivity, they'll do it. If maximizing your financial
even today, even in the face of capitalism and everything
taking
else,
certain things out of
First
production,
Nations societies still
deindustrializing
resist
whole areas,
individualism
buying
with
up all the
collectivism.
public assets in Eastern Europe, and then just selling off the
Sorry,
assets
Kai.
and deindustrializing them and closing them because you don't want their steel industry to compete with yours. You don't want their mining industry to compete with yours. You don't want their agribusiness to compete with their collective farms to compete with your agribusiness.
I will definitely pause from now on. My mistake.
So you buy them up and then you put them out of business, which is what has been happening all over Europe. It's happening today now in Serbia, now that Serbia has the blessings of the free market capitalist democracy. David Broderick, former president of U.S. Steel, said it very nicely. I heard him once on TV. He said, U.S. Steel is not in the business of making steel. That was very smart. I came to the edge of my seat. I said, is he really going to say it? And you know what? He did. And then he didn't say, it's in the business of making a profit. He didn't say that. He said something better. He said, it's in the business of making the highest possible profit for its shareholders. That's what it's in the business of.
Hey, Zoop,
That's what
welcome in.
U.S. Steel is in the business of. That's what General Motors is. That's what General Electric is. That's what General Dynamics is. That's what all the generals are in the business of, making sure that those who have shall have yet more. The highest possible profit. One of the key instruments for this accumulation process is a convention known as money. I was taught when I was in school that money is a medium of exchange. It's a way we can deal and exchange goods and services. And that has a really nice, neutral sounding ring to it. Money is a medium of exchange. Money can be used for good or bad. You can use money to build a hospital or to bribe an official. You can use money to enhance with scholarships or corrupt or kill or whatever. Actually, on further reflection, I decided that money is not a neutral thing. Money is not an instrument for good or bad. Money itself, by its very nature, historically in a class society, becomes a means of abstracting, mobilizing, and accumulating wealth. Otherwise, they wouldn't have invented it. They wouldn't have put so much stock in it. They wouldn't be going after it so much. In the olden days, when wealth consisted principally of land, crops, herds, furs, silver plates, gold cups, jewelry, and such, you could accumulate just so much, and you can do just so much with it. But abstracted from material wealth, money becomes a very flexible, very powerful, very mobile tool for accumulation. In a world of rich and poor, there's nothing neutral about money. It's the same with technology. When they say technology is just a neutral instrument, you could use it for good, you could use it for bad. That's not true. Technology is developed within the framework of a social structure. Technology is developed by those who own and control technology, who have a lot of money. And they develop technologies of surveillance, they develop technologies of war, they develop technologies of self-promotion, of marketing. That's what they use technology for the most part. Cell phones are very tacky, I think. That's something we don't want to...
Yeah, so, sorry, by the way, what I was saying earlier, I was just mentioning that someone said that's an interesting split. I assume it takes commitment to work to prevent the hoarding to maintain communalist social relations in the face of surplus. And I mean, there were, of course, First Nations that, were able to achieve surpluses that still maintain communalism. And it's because, of course, those First Nations, as many of them do still even to this day, maintain majorly collectivist ideology, even in the face of this capitalist genocidal onslaught, right? Which is incredible. And I think that alone speaks to the fact that not everywhere where a surplus, you're going to have individualist ideology break out. I think that whole idea is a very mechanical understanding of the way human brain works, right? Yeah, it is possible for that to break out, for individualism to break out, and thus have that person justify, or that group of people justify, their surplus while other people starve or whatever it is. But I don't think that's necessarily a required condition whenever a surplus exists. And this is something that, like I say, First Nations, Marxists and communists and I mean not just First Nations, but they fought against this whole idea as something being, very stagist. Like the idea that Lenin fought against, that every society has to pass through the stage of capitalism itself in order to go on to socialism. Capitalism has already emerged in the world, right? So not every single nation needs to go through capitalism, because there's a dialectic. The entire world is connected, and other nations can learn from the experience of more advanced capitalist nations, which is how Russia was able to go from not a very highly developed capitalist society, but still develop into a socialist society while having a socialist government. Never did it by using capitalism per se. They used it by doing a new economic period, but that was still under a socialist government, using, socialist law.
I was listening to somebody who I consider to be the id of the right wing. Let's get Freudian about this. There's the super ego that puts the gloss and maintains the hypocritical appearances, and there's the ego that kind of goes out and gets it and tries to justify it and all. And then there's the id, the raw, primitive truth. I was listening to the id
exactly,
of the
Robo.
right wing,
Welcome in, by the way. Yeah. Capitalism was used to overthrow feudalism. Time to move on.
It's not a zero-sum
like a long time
game
ago,
we have
right?
Here
a long fucking time ago.
It's not a zero-sum game. When there's more for the big guys at the top, which he is a multi-millionaire.
Starting to outlive its usefulness.
They never say that. They never come out and say.
We're starting to outlive its usefulness shortly after feudalism was overthrown. And I mean, this is another point that I think a lot of Marxists, especially European Marxists, have made, or they simply treat this one period, which is actually in the book that we're reading now, Red Skin, White Mass, that the period of primitive accumulation, they sort of just gloss over that, when really what it means is it's another term for colonialism, stealing the land and then using that to build up the wealth, the value. That's the part that's sort of glossed over with European Marxists. It's primitive accumulation, and then you just have capitalism. Well, what is that primitive accumulation? It's going among all these other nations and countries and, taking their resources. Before you have imperialism as a developed system. That's what you have, is this primitive accumulation, which was achieved through colonialism. So you can really say that capitalism was built on colonialism. The root of capitalism is thus colonialism.
By the way, I'm one of those fat, greedy pigs that they talk about. He said, when there's more for them, there's also more for us. The pie gets bigger, we all get a bigger slice. It's not zero sum. A rising tide lifts all boats. Well, there's another saying. A rising tide sinks many boats, drowns many people. In fact, it can be zero-sum, and to some extent it is. I'll show you.
I agree.
In a minute
Too old
why.
for Twitch.
Now,
Capitalism is a poison,
into the
not a
discussion
tool
of
for
capitalism,
revolution.
it's at this point that we hear about the
a controversial point that I made on Twitter not that long ago was when I mentioned that the American Revolution really wasn't a progressive revolution in the Marxist sense. Because in the Marxist sense, I mean, first of all, a progressive revolution, a bourgeois revolution would change the means of production, the social order from being from being feudalist to being capitalist. But the U.S. was never set up as a feudalist country to begin with. It was half slave society and half capitalist society pretty much from the beginning. Save for the very, very earliest days when it was like just people fucking trying to survive and natives helping them for whatever fucking reason. We made natives in certain nations made the mistake of doing that. I read Caliban and the Witch not long ago, and I think she explicitly makes a connection between enclosure on the local scale and colonialism, if I remember correctly. Yeah, some have, and of course, like in more recent times, like Cabral and other Marxists have come along and corrected this and explained how colonialism is the root of capitalism, right? And if you want to fully uproot capitalism, you need to uproot colonialism as well. Capitalism is the conceit that an entire class of personhood is necessary to allow the village to combine their resources. It is definitely a false conceit. And I mean, like we pointed out earlier, there are nations who, like DPRK is a nation that exists without a capitalist class. No one's making profit individually off of their labor other than them. Which is, how, even though it's under the most immense sanctions that any nation has ever seen, that's how it's still able to give its citizens free healthcare at all levels, free education, provide housing for every citizen, and deliver a supply of food in addition to what people can afford with their income. Like, the reason it can do all those things is because it has no private property, no ownership like that.
Entrepreneurial spirit.
The only type of non-state, non-public owned property in DPRK would be cooperative property. Because the principle is that the state doesn't take hold of cooperatives forcibly, and it never did. Instead, cooperatives are encouraged to eventually sell to the state and become state-owned cooperatives. But, of course, as you can imagine, that takes many, many, many years to spread to the entire society. Even if in a small country where you have like 7 million, it still takes a long-ass fucking time.
But what about the guy who goes out, he has an idea, and he develops a commodity, and he gets a market, and he hires people, and creates jobs? It's always said in that kind of nostalgic sing-song way, jobs, and makes a contribution to the community.
Parenti.
You could, by this time you're getting all moist-eyed, And I always have to say, I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about mom-and-pop capitalism, okay? Lenin made the point.
I kind of am, though.
5 million small businesses count for nothing. A few giant cartels count for everything. I'm talking about the people who have the muscle. I'm not talking about the squirrels who are dancing among the elephants and getting stomped out. 400 a week getting stomped out of business, small businesses, with others coming in. Of course, hope beats eternally. I'm talking about the elephants. Talking about those who are doing the
small
stomping.
business
I'm talking about
too.
the transnational monopoly finance capital reality, not the entrepreneurial mythology. So that's what we're talking about. And for them, it is, to some extent, zero sum. Great wealth creates great poverty. There's not just an innocent juxtaposition.
100%
We
agree.
always point out that juxtaposition. We always say, isn't it tragic? So much wealth right next to so much poverty here. Isn't this terrible? As if they're just sitting there in embarrassing juxtaposition. No, Great wealth causes great poverty. You can't have great wealth unless you have poverty. You can't have rich slaveholders living on these big plantations, living a life like that, unless you have impoverished slaves. You can't have the lord born to the manor unless you have the serfs who do all that work for him. And you can't have great transnational corporations unless you have workers who work all their lives living from hand to mouth and who end up with a miserable little pension if they're lucky. Now the wealthy class doesn't just sit there with the wealth, it translates its wealth into political power, into social control, and into cultural hegemony. In time, the ever-expanding wealth and the ever-expanding appetite for wealth goes abroad. It has to look for other places to carve out natural resources.
You're saying I'm fighting my doppelganger.
Even cheaper labor, especially when their own workers start putting all sorts of ridiculous, stupid, wasteful demands on you, like a living wage, a pension fund, vacations, occupational safety, consumer protections, environmental protections. When will it stop? What are they doing? Every dollar spent wasted on stupid things like that is one less dollar in my pocket. So I go to Indonesia. I go to Haiti, where I can pay people not $15 an hour, not $1 an hour, but $1 a day. That's what I go to. So they go abroad, and there too, it's zero sum. Empire brings great wealth to the investing class and great expense for the people of the imperial nation. The process of empire, in case you want to know, the process of empire is what is called imperialism. And imperialism is when the ruling interests of one country expropriate or exploit the land, the labor, the natural resources, the markets, and the capital and technology of another country. That's what imperialism is. So these ruling interests do the same to the people in these other places as they do to people here. The patricians pursue their far-off plunder, and we, the people, are also very much involved in empire in terms of its costs. They get the benefits, and we get the costs. We pay the taxes, and we pay the blood. The empire feeds off the republic. The empire has more power, more grandeur, more scope, more reach, more striking force than ever. It is one of the wonders of human history. And the republic has public hospitals that are closing, public schools that are closing, kids who haven't had one teacher in a term for years, but have had seen 15 different substitutes in 3 months. Schools that don't even have enough textbooks.
I have permission, Dorian.
Schools where the roofs are leaking.
I swear I'm not a criminal.
Housing so miserable that we have hundreds of thousands of homeless.
This is
begging
all
all
legal.
over in an empire that's so ever rich. You're seeing it happen this very year. Dramatic instances of states and cities saying, we are going bankrupt. We cannot meet our budgets. We are in a state of crisis. We will have to cut back our human services. And meanwhile, $200 billion being spent over the $402 billion that's being spent on the military budget. Over that, $200 billion
now
being spent on the war in Iraq. With fat billion-dollar contracts for Halliburton and Bechtel and 70 other U.S. corporations, and also access to a huge trove of oil worth about $3 to $4 trillion. And that's really one of the compelling reasons why the U.S. rulers suddenly feel so compelled to bring democracy and electricity and running water to Iraq. First you destroy the electricity and running water, you bomb their utilities, and then you say, love me, I'm going to bring you electricity and running water. Not this year, but next year, whenever. Okay. So, whenever. The plutocracy in this country also operates on the assumption that the public treasury is at its disposal. So while you have a ruling class propaganda that says government is the cause of all your problems, stop running to government for a handout, do self-reliance, it's the free market that gives you your prosperity, while you have them saying that, these same people are going to government, going to the public treasury, and they're pulling out billions of dollars in equity subsidies, loan guarantees, export subsidies, research and development assistance, production loss compensations, tax write. If mom and pop go out of business, they don't get bailouts. They don't get bailouts from the federal government. But if Chrysler threatens to go out of business, what happens? Uncle Sam comes with hundreds of millions of dollars to help him out. Tax write-offs, grants and aids, hundreds of billions of dollars every year
join
go
the club.
from
Hit
the
that
US
420
taxpayer
button, someone.
To
thank you, thank you.
To the Fortune 500. To them that have shall be given.
Thank
to
you.
them that have not shall be taken, even what little that they have. And the plutocrats operate on the assumption that the rest of us should learn to stand on our own feet and stop running to the government. Plutocracy also does not look with favor on the public sector. If you develop a public sector of services or one of production, which we're not allowed to do in this country, the government can't go directly into market production. It's just simply not allowed. I mean, there are laws against all that. But building public housing, building public health services, you are creating jobs, you're creating tax base, you get revenue back, you're creating services, you're answering human needs, and these plutocrats aren't making a penny on it. That's like Tony Soprano finding out all these new restaurants have opened up right in his neighborhood, and he doesn't get any take on it. And so they hate the public sector. The public sector demonstrates that you can actually have human needs taken care of, human production, all that sort of thing, human services.
Spot on with the analyses
and these
tonight.
guys don't make a penny. And so the goal is to privatize this entire public sector, because then we get our take. And their take makes Tony Soprano look like a piker, right? What does he deal with? Thousands of dollars. We're talking about millions and billions of dollars here. The plutocrats are also good, like Tony is. They're good at dealing with and roughing up and beating up on those who can't defend themselves. The low income, the disabled. I'll tell you something else they're good at beating up on that can't defend itself. That's the environment. The environment can't defend itself. We have to defend it. And they're really good at it. They're really good. They see the environment. They see whatever natural resources are left. They see that as they have a right to whatever those natural resources are there. They have a right to get it and use them as they want, when they want it, to maximize profit, quick cash profits and the like. Another device they have is deficit spending. This is how the plutocracy uses our otherwise democratic government in the most undemocratic ways. It's a myth.
I don't know
it's a
about
myth
otherwise.
that right-wingers are fiscal conservatives. No one's a bigger, wilder spender than the reactionaries who are in power now. Ronald Reagan tripled the national debt from $800 billion to $2.3 trillion by the time he got out. George Bush added an additional $2 trillion to the national debt. Clinton reduced the debt somewhat and actually produced a surplus in his last two budgets. No deficit. What is a deficit? A deficit is when the government spends more money than it takes in revenues. How can it do that? It does that by borrowing from people who have lots of money. Rich creditors, banks, financial institutions, and the like, floating government
fucking
bonds.
asinine.
The national debt is the accumulation of these yearly deficits.
That right there is asinine to me.
Deficits and debts accomplish several things for rich conservatives. First, the debt is a source of safe investment and income for the creditor class. The bonds, those U.S. bonds you buy, you have the full faith and credit of the federal government behind them. It's a safe investment. And yet one of the things with people with billions of dollars is, what do they do with it? What do I put it into? Where can I put it, you know? That it'll be safe, or that it'll make me a return, like. The second thing is that deficits and debts represent an upward redistribution of income from the millions who work to the rich investors. Because what happens is these investors lend billions of dollars every year to the U.S. government, and we, the people, the taxpayers, have to pay them back at interest that accumulates and accumulates and accumulates and grows. So we're borrowing from the people. The U.S. government is borrowing from the people who they should be taxing. Instead, they cut their taxes, and then they borrow money from them that we then have to pay them. So more and more of our federal budget is being privatized. That's the third function of debt and deficit. That in effect, you're privatizing the federal budget. A larger chunk of it is going every year to pay off rich creditors. Not for schools, not for hospitals, not for education, not for environmental protection, not for the Forest Service, not for rural electrification, not for housing, blah, blah. No, it's going to pay off rich creditors. The larger the debt, the larger the portion of your tax dollars that goes to the creditors. And fourth, finally, these huge deficits, $500 billion in George W. Bush's budget this year, $500 billion. These huge deficits become an excuse to cut the public sector services. We can't afford all these other silly luxury things like aid to disabled children. Right? Our governor right here, Muscles, didn't he just do that?
Muscles.
His first act as governor of California was to cut the program to disabled children. We just, oh, I'm sorry, but we just have to do it.
That was his Arnold voice.
Well, through much of history, then, the leaders of a capitalist state have been concerned with three things. First, to extract surplus value from the labor of people.
Come on.
Extract wealth, all the things I've just been saying, from the many, putting it in the coffers of the few. This whole process I'm describing.
Jesus Christ.
Loan guarantees, export subsidies, well, that's all part of capital accumulation. Second function of the state is to protect that entire system of accumulation and upward redistribution. Keep the entire system of class control and class exploitation intact, suppress resistance and dissident elements, and when that becomes too difficult, then grant concessions, incorporate changes into a new synthesis that helps the overall capitalist system to remain intact, but with a slightly more equitable distribution of wages and wealth.
That's what Bernie Sanders does.
That's not class oppression, that's called class struggle, when people fight back and they make certain gains, and the guys at the top say, whoa, this is really getting hot, we better give in on this, better give in on that. This second function, though, this systemic function of systemically maintaining this system of expropriation, is achieved with symbolic manipulation, informational control. I have water here already. Police state repression, control of the law and the courts and other auxiliary institutions. There's a third function that the capitalist state has, and this is the one I find very interesting because I think it's really being overlooked by the reactionaries who are in power today. They're called conservatives. I don't get it. Why? A conservative, if someone is someone who does not want any kind of change because he doesn't want any infringement on his powers and his privileges. These guys want change all over the place. They call them reforms, but they want rollbacks. They're changing everything. They want to get rid of Social Security. They want to get rid of environmental controls, the Clean Air Act, the Fresh Air. He's undermining the wetlands bills. He's undermining through executive orders, through reinterpretations. He's
conserving death.
At it one way or the other. They're rolling it all back.
Conserving death.
They learned from the Newt Gingrich days that if you try to do it in all one fell swoop, a Republican revolution, wipe it all out, yay, that can backfire. And even among your own Republicans, there are people who say, whoa, wait a minute, I like fresh air, clean air. And Gingrich had that happen. He had these ranchers writing in and said, what are you doing to the environment, you crazy jackass? So now what they do it is by peace, 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 peace. But they're reactionaries, that's what they are. And these reactionaries have forgotten the third function. And that is, the third function of the capitalist state is to protect the owning class from itself, to protect it from its own avarice, to see that the parasite doesn't destroy the very organism upon which it battens. The capitalist state must keep the capitalist class from devouring itself. And we see that was happening with Enron, WorldCom, Halliburton, Harkin. The activist element of the investor class literally expropriating not only taxpayers and workers, but other investors. So, hey, why worry about producing cars and refrigerators? Then you got to worry about trying to sell them and this and that and make a profit. Let's just go where the money is. Just tap into streams of money. Let's go. Who has money? Investors, pension funds, 401ks, all this stuff. Let's go and steal money from them. And they have been caught plundering investor income, billions of dollars. Many of these investors, of course, are small investors too, life pensions and all that. And this is a real crime. I mean, this is really now being looked at. And some of these guys are going to have to do hours of community service.
That's sick. Thickening.
I mean, I'm getting really tough here, boy. I mean, you think I'm kidding. Look at Argentina. Do you remember what happened in Argentina a few years ago? I mean, I thought there was a case of the failure of the capitalist state to protect itself against capitalism. All of the people's pensions and monies and funds and everything, Argentina, this investor class went in there and stole. You don't understand, you're dealing with people who are insatiable. You're dealing with people who are absolutely ruthless. We are dealing with addicts. It's not true that coke or heroin is the worst addiction in America, or cigarettes or alcohol. The worst addiction, the most crippling, the most damaging addiction is wealth. These people are just out of control. They just want more and more and more. And they're not unlike the ruling classes of all history. If the ruling classes of all history have ever wanted anything, there's only one thing they've ever wanted, and that's everything. They want all the lands, all the choice crops, all the herds, all the rich mineral deposits. They want control of all the labor, all the markets. They want all the civilities and comforts and luxuries of civil society while paying none of the costs. They want everything. And then when they got everything, they want still more. They want gold chalices to drink out of. They want $1,000 bills to light their cigars. They want, of course, the ruling class has learned since the days of the robber baron, they're not as crass and crude about it. But they are just as ruthless in their dedication to this accumulation. And I think that might be the crucial difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. That is, the Democrats are a capitalist party. They will tell you that. They're not so, they're capitalists. But they are different in that they do see this third function as important, that the state does have to occasionally rein in the avarice of the ruling class. So capital, the other thing that capital has to do is it needs to continually expand, now on a global level. Ownership of the world's water supplies is next. A source of investment, ownership, and profit.
Good way to start a conversation.
A source of creating scarcity. A source of creating a new private market and more profits. Get people to work harder and harder so they have to pay a large chunk of their modest incomes for water. For water.
Watching nothing related to that. Fuck.
So corporate capitalism moves restlessly into all corners of the world, destroying happy communities in the Philippines, in the Amazon, in Africa, in the United States for fast buck plunder. In the Philippines, you have these free business zones. They'll go into islands and communities where people have orchards and groves and fish and plant and have been living there for who knows how many centuries and living a good life, and they come in, drive these people off the land with these phony deeds, and then just harvest all the timber that's there. In tropical areas can't survive, that kind of thing. It turns it into a wasteland, worse for the ecology, worse for the air, worse for that. These people are driven off into the shanty towns, and there you got the free market, transnational corporate free market doing its thing, pursuing its profits, and destroying human lives, human communities, ways of life, and the environment. So this empire is not an end in itself. This empire, I wrote a book called Against Empire, and when it came out a few years ago, people said, empire? Well, Parenti, boy, you really, boy, overstating it again. But I noticed that you got people from the Hoover Institute. You got people from the Hoover Institute who are writing books called Empire. You've got these right-wing pundits who overpopulate our media, are all of them talking about, we're an empire, and we ought to get used to it and face up to it, and we got to start acting like an empire, and we got to maintain our credibility as an empire, and all this. Well, what is this empire for? This empire is not an end in itself. It's an instrument, as the Roman Empire was, as the British Empire was, as the Spanish Empire was. It's an instrument for extracting and grabbing wealth. It's an instrument of imperialism. So Max Weber was a bourgeois, conservative social theorist, a non-Marxist. I give you a quote of his. He wrote this in about 1912. The question is, how are freedom and democracy in the long run at all possible under the domination of highly developed capitalism? That question, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, that question is still with us. How to defend and advance a political economic democracy in the face of corporate economic domination.
Sorry, you can just spring a name on me like Max Vapor.
Well, there exists not only class oppression, but class struggle. The many have been fighting back. Democracy is a wonderful invention by the people of history to protect themselves from the oppressions and impoverishment caused by wealth and by the abuses of wealth. But democracy is more than just its electoral and representational procedures. It has a substance and a content. Oh, they'll give you the procedures. We can have elections for dog catcher, elections for president, elections for this, elections for assembly, elections for school board, elections all over the place. But democracy's got to be something more than just government of the people. It's got to be government for the people, for their needs, for their socio-economic well-being, for it to be a real democracy.
Ooh, and that gets into... That's very related to a lot of the Kim Jong-il works we're actually reading right now. Where, I mean, they talk about how, like, a big failure USSR was that they didn't implement the party and the state as being a servant of the people. They didn't take that far enough, especially after Lenin and Stalin were gone. Like, it seemed like they completely stagnated in building up any sort of mass line and building up the party into this, like, servant of the people that it should have been. I think it should have been able to achieve like the same kind of distributed housing that you see in DPRK myself.
Today's rulers keep the appearance of democracy while undoing the substance and subverting the substance, while undoing the economic gains that we have won over the past century. And then when the people try to organize and resist this rollback, then they launch attacks against our very democratic rights. That when we try to protect our standard of living, our economic democracy, and to do that, we use our political democracy. They then attack our political democracy and our political rights. Or to George Bush summed it up in his inimitable way. He said, it sure would be a lot easier to govern if it was a dictatorship. And that's what they seem to be moving toward. Well, don't think for a moment that our reactionary rulers don't care what we think. That is their most important concern. Oh, do they care? Oh, are they watching? Oh, do they try to keep us convinced of their lies? They're trying to get in our heads all the time, getting into our heads. They're trying to close our mouths all the time, to wave the flag in our faces, to manipulate and pretend, to keep the boys and girls fighting and dying in some land which most of those kids couldn't have even found on a map last year. To some extent, ladies and gentlemen, to some extent, all regimes, all governments ultimately rest on public opinion. And when that opinion shifts and when support declines, then those rulers have to backpedal. They have to hide their arrogance. They have to pretend that they share our outrage and our concerns, and they're as concerned as any of you, I swear. And to keep that pretense credible, they have to take actions and make concessions that they don't want to make at all. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to keep pressuring, agitating, getting our opinion out there at two levels. One, horizontally, building our base wider and wider, and two, impacting vertically upon them and letting them know how we feel and what we feel. When the people are ready to lead, the leaders will eventually follow. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Michael Parenti. Now, on this channel, we actually listen to the question and answer period. There's some of the most unique parts of the
Parenti.
talk.
We've just heard I guess it's the fourth program of this General Assembly brought to you by the Unitarian Universalists for a Just Economic Community. We've had several thousand people attend our programs at this GA and hear some of the most informed people in our nation speak to you. This is the labor of a small organization with one staff
claims
person
to be that one bet that was said the mic won't mess up.
An organization that has helped create the statement of conscience on economic globalization and its consequences.
What a twist.
That has brought a workers' bill of rights.
Everybody's going to pay them
and other statements of
conscience. Everybody's going to pay Robo some labor vouchers
and
now.
has tried to give you congregations
that's socialism.
So that they can study. Yes, there will be a question and answer period, I've been reminded, with Michael in just a few moments. There will be time, Michael. Be sure of that.
Dorian.
We have led the efforts
you can
to
take all my labor vouchers.
Educate UUs about economic globalization, and have taken people and organized people to go down to Miami to the FTAA. We have taken people to Mexico to see the effects on human beings of economic globalization, corporate globalization. And we need to have your support to continue this work. You will find on your chairs either the call with a pink cover that's got an application for membership, or
Not to be confused, by the way, with globalism. Globalization, economic globalization, corporate globalization, whatever you want to call it, is specifically the raising of corporate property rights above all other rights.
This brochure, and we would urge and ask you to please help support UUs for a just economic community.
Especially in terms of elevating them across borders so that corporate rights supersede other countries' particular human rights or whatever other kind of protections they might have. That's what fucking the GATT and all these other agreements, that's what they're trying to materialize.
This critical time, you've just heard how critical it is, and it's going to get even worse, unfortunately, as the empire continues its deeds of death and destruction and exploitation. So now we'll go to Michael for questions. Thank you very much. There's a microphone here in the center.
You play a dangerous game when you press no. There's not going to be mic trouble. So congrats,
for
Robo.
possible broadcast. Thank you.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of
That's it. We won't have time for too many more after that, I think. Yeah, right.
I wonder if you could talk about the role of the defense industry in transferring wealth from the public sector to the private sector.
You just did it. That's what its goal is. Defense spending is marvelous. I mean, if you're a military contractor, look what you got. You have non-competitive bidding, most cases. So the price I name is the price the government gives me. You have a predetermined market, a guaranteed market. Unlike the auto manufacturer, he's got to go out and worry about selling his cars, those ecological disasters known as cars, or refrigerator or TVs, you got to sell them. This guy's got it already, it's already bought before he's even making them. The Pentagon's going to take every one of these planes, every one of these things. You get research and development from the government. You get equity. McDonald, I mean, it's multi-billion-dollar, you know, they built a factory. What they'll tell you, oh, we invested $10 million in and we made $1 million a year profit, 10%. They didn't tell you, they didn't tell you that in fact the real capital. No, they'll say the thing. I forget it. I don't want to give you that example because I'd have to start making up the figures. But I mean, the Pentagon will give them the land and the factory and pay for almost all the research and development. So McDonnell Aircraft or whoever, McDouglas, what am I? What? Boeing, all of them, all the pigs. Yeah, right. They're really getting so incredibly subsidized. There's nothing like it. The other thing that defense spending has, it's got a built-in obsolescence. You know, it's infinite. I mean, how prepared is preparedness? I mean, when are you fully prepared? Now we find out that the $450 billion we're spending every year on the military doesn't cover wars. Oh no, that's the peacetime military. What? That's for, pension funds and stuff, maneuvers and stuff. But they need I forgot what I was going to say. Okay. They need extra billions for the wars. That's exactly what happened with Iraq. They've gone and spent an extra $100 billion now.
SpaceX massively subsidized, for example.
Your tax dollars at work, your future tax dollars at work, not just the ones now, but the ones later. Yes, Ms.
Okay. I'm also a member of WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom.
Wait, could I just add one last thing to that? The function then is, as far as the question of the privatization of the economy with defense spending, it's the most it's the biggest stream, the most profitable source of government contracts and profit, corporate profit. That's what defense spending is. That's why it's so untouchable. Not because it keeps you safe and all that. It's because it keeps them super rich. Yeah.
Okay, I am a member of WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and one of our very big projects
I think it's a good organization.
Challenging corporate abuses, corporate power, and abolishing corporate personhood. They are persons, but they're psychopaths. I will happily give you a flyer. Are you a member of WILF?
I've given talks at WILF organizations. But no, I'm not a member of WILF. I thought it was women only. Yeah.
All right. Yes, my name is Strider. Adam Smith was the founding philosophical father of capitalism, and in 1759, in Moral Sentiments, he wrote, "The purpose of government is to protect wealth. Its very end is to defend the rich against the poor." The next, prior to him, was John Locke, who said, "Anything not being exploited for profit is wasteland, and is therefore the property of anyone who wants to go and take it from those who are not properly exploiting it." What we have in the last 50 years is the very conscious creation of scarcity. It happened with the Mining Act in the 19th century, and with the railroads' theft of 150 million acres, and now the airwaves and the water. But it used to be just a natural concomitant. Now it is very... It's class oppression, and I would like to speak about that. I've worked all my life, and I'd like to speak for another 15 seconds.
Go ahead.
All right. The theft of the commons of the whole world has been absolutely conscious policy for the last 50 years to create scarcity.
Wealth,
Could you address that as being a known and conscious policy?
It's like the key thing, right? The key thing that separates labor from all other like resources is that labor, the value isn't used up entirely in the process of production, right? And therefore that's why it's like labor is the only value generating resource
right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I dealt with some of that in the very opening part of my... Are you listening?
Yes. Yes.
I dealt with some of that in the opening part of my talk. I noticed you came in late and you may have missed that. But we did talk about the function of land and labor and how these things are expropriated. And you gave some a very telling quote by Adam Smith and some good information on that. And it's not just the last 50 years, but of course in the last 50 years the process has intensified and it's becoming more in crisis and more telling and more costly, to the point where the whole planet's ecology is now at risk.
Thank you.
One of the insidious strengths of capitalism is that many of us do very well, even though we start from very poor origins, such as Bill Gates or Rush Limbaugh. Could you talk about?
Okay, this guy needs to calm down. Did he just say Bill Gates came from poor fucking origins? Oh man said we... Okay, if anybody knows anything about Bill Gates' history, you know full well he didn't come from poor fucking origins. Like, calm down, bud.
About that?
Bill Gates started from poor origins?
He wasn't...
His father's a billionaire.
Okay, well, others do, though.
He goes, well, okay, others. He couldn't name two people that weren't fucking billionaires.
Well, I don't know what the point is. The point is that there are people who make great fortunes. Yeah, that's true. Generally in an advanced, mature capitalist society, making a great fortune is a rare exception. Bill Gates, I mean, you can name them on one or two hands. The surest way to gain wealth in a capitalist society is to have the foresight, the resourcefulness, and the intelligence and creativity to pick the right parents at birth. That really is the best way. there's very little really transporting from one class to another. I mean, you might go, my father was a blue-collar Italian-American worker in New York, and I was a street kid in New York City, and I didn't go to college after high school, not for a while. I worked and all that. Okay, so I was lucky because I was at a certain stage where the economy was expanding, universities were expanding, there was a stipend, a fellowship. I don't see that, though. I don't see that as I don't see it as a manifestation of the beneficence of capitalism, one. I don't see it as a demonstration of the individual greatness and accomplishment of this present person. I'm a self-made man. That's baloney. There's no such thing as a self-made man. I wouldn't have been able to go anywhere if it wasn't for generations of people whose names I don't even know, who fought for the principle of public education. That's how I went to school, because I got public education.
Press F to pay respect, chat. Being bound to birth lottery during austerity, yeah. Yeah. Hey, cool, the hat changed on my emblem during this stream. Now my cat has a more modern communist hat on. Isn't that fucking...
And that was true. I went to City College of New York. And even when I went to Yale for my PhD, it was on stipends and fellowships, because there were people who fought for having stipends and fellowships for needy students. Those are all socialist principles. Those are all socialist reasons. So rather than saying, yeah, my pop was poor and all, and look at me today, unemployed academic, eh? I call myself a recovering academic. I've been kicked out of some of the best universities in America for my political activities. Okay. Look, I meant to tell the people, we have, what, 20, how much time is left? Oh, till 4:30. Oh, there was a gentleman who sat down who was ahead of you guys. If you want to, he should come back up here. Come on up. Then.
Yeah, I guess I just passed 3 months
and I'm going to sign books. My copies of my book, The Assassination of Julius Caesar, The People's History of Ancient Rome, are out there. If you want a read, if you really, I mean, I loved writing that book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my cat went from having the World War I style revolutionary hat. Now it's got the next one. Before that, it's got no hat.
The only book I ever wrote where I was unhappy when I finished it. I wanted to keep going. It's a fascinating period. It's really a fascinating time. Those Romans really knew how to do it. I mean, it was really pretty obvious. I mean, the killings, the this, the that, lots of sex and violence in the book. So, but mostly what I discovered is that ancient history is not so ancient, and that there are very compelling and intriguing parallels. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm the spouse of a Chilean refugee who, for the last 25 years, has every day probably given me this theoretical framework that you presented nice and succinctly today of the capitalist society and that we're an empire.
Well, I would say the first month or two, consider yourself lucky, but every day for the last 20 years, Mom,
yes,
I mean, that's...
I'm saying that on purpose.
Oh, okay.
And there's a degree of depression.
Well, thanks for staying for the whole talk. I thought you would have gotten up and run out, yeah.
There's a degree of depression and hopelessness because of that. Is there something in history that gives you hope in terms of the class struggle against the capitalist society?
Well, yeah, I mean, gains have been won. I mean, even in our own time, very important gains have been won. Don't forget, in 1900, the U.S. was a third world nation, half a century before the term was invented. We had mass unemployment, mass poverty. We had diphtheria and tuberculosis epidemics in the cities. We had child labor, children in factories working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. We had, to say nothing's changed, it's always the same, it isn't quite right. I mean, sometimes the struggle does replicate itself, but at a different level. we had the worst and earliest form of class oppression in this society. That's called slavery, which was abolished. Slavery still exists. There's about 27 million men, women, and children who are being held in peonage or debt bondage or outright servitude. You folks should not get online. We're not going to. We only got about 5 or 10 minutes, 10 minutes more, so I don't think it's going to happen. But so I would say, yeah, sometimes some things get worse, but other things do get better, and the people have made important democratic gains, and we mustn't forget that, and we mustn't lose those gains. Their goal is to get us back to 1900. If they, in their heart of hearts, they want us back to an America where there was no labor unions, no public services to speak of, no public protections and consumer protections, none of that. They wanted it where they had it all, and we were just the peons who lined up begging for jobs and working 60, 70-hour weeks. So things have gotten better to that extent.
I'm a beneficiary of the New Deal rescuing public education in New York. And I was able to attend CCNY tuition-free because of B+ average on the Regents examinations. And then the GI Bill of Rights got me to get my bachelor's and my master's degree and start a family. And I think it's the best investment the government ever made. But my question is, Benito Mussolini was quoted in Harper's Magazine as saying, redefining fascism as corporatism, the merger of government and corporations. Do you think we're on that track?
Fascism was inspired by America,
well,
bud.
Mussolini's corporatism was more than the merger of corporations and state. The corporate, it meant the incorporation of the entire population. There were corporate components, workers, peasants, middle class, and all. It's another whole thing. That's a playing around with the term. Fascism is a false revolution. We use the term fascism to mean Pinochet, oppressors, right-wingers who support the state. But fascism was a particular invention of the ruling class. It projects a false populism. It projects a mass populism. And in that sense, you're getting some of that from this class today. They project this false populism that we're for you folks. It's these liberal elites who try to run everything. It's these latte-sipping hoity-toits, and we're for you regular folk here, you know. And George Bush gets up and he says, Americans, I heard his ad on TV, he said, Americans are hard-working people. He just gets his Texas accent gets thicker, and we're out there and we're doing it, you know. So they try to affect, because they know that a lot of people don't vote the issues. They vote against their own interests. They vote their values. And they say, we're the guys you want. We're the church-going ones. We're the ones who believe in marriage and the sanctity of marriage. Rush Limbaugh, he loves marriage. He just got his 3rd divorce. He's going to get married a 4th time. He loves marriage. He believes in marriage. He's going to keep doing it until he gets it right, you know. I mean, they're the biggest hypocrites. They're no more pristine in their personal lives than we are. But this is the hypocritical veneer they put out there. You know, George Bush never read a book in his life. They like him for that. That's what they, you know, they don't quite say that, but regular guy and all that sort of thing. So in that sense, they do make mass appeals in order, and they do conjure up irrelevant enemies. They say the people who are doing this to you are the immigrants, or the liberals, the media elites. What a joke! They own the media, and the like. And that's what Hitler did. That's what fascism was. It's a way of mobilizing and misdirecting mass sentiment, and with a revolutionary aura. You're saying we need a revolution, but you give them a false revolution. There's no change in the class structure except downward. You destroy labor unions. That when Hitler came in, he cut wages in half, by half. I mean, the conditions for the Germans went from bad to worse. Increased military spending, privatized things. Does any of this sound familiar? And he conjured up these irrelevant enemies, saying it was the trade unionists, the communists, the Jews, the Jewish bankers. You know, they put in a little bit of anti-capitalism, but they were the Jewish bankers, not the bankers. And behind all this were the Jews and the communists and that like. So that's what fascism is. It's not just dictatorship, it's a manipulation. And Mussolini did the same thing. Okay, yeah.
Thank you for a chance to get a word in. I just really appreciate what you've said today. I just wondered if you'd speak to the whole issue of the atom. You know, Einstein spoke his words about everything changing but our way of thinking and what the outlook is, and how this has been surrounded by both secrecy and also a lot of psychological denial. I mean, you know, we don't want to think about it, but it is.
Think about what? The atom?
The whole issue of atomic weapons and the military and what they're now up to. I mean, it's like the Cold War is all on again as far as this administration goes. What do you think of what's happening that way?
Well, that's part of the empire's plan to become so totally invincible, and you do that by controlling war from outer space, by building ultimate weapons, the ultimate weapons, and they're using weapons. They use them in against Serbia and in Kosovo, depleted uranium, horrible effect. They used them in the Gulf War in '91, and they're using them again now in Iraq, depleted uranium weapons. They are developing new nuclear weapons. It's all part of this same, what their values are. All their money, all their inventiveness, all their science goes into what? Surveillance and destruction. What is it? Well, think of all the other things. Name the great military governmental leaders that gave us all. They didn't do it. It came from the people. Everything else came from the people. Everything else. You want to name it? Conservation, public education, workers' rights, women's rights, civil liberties. All that came from ordinary people fighting in the United States. These guys up there never offered or came up with one of those things at all. Their job was to resist those things, ignore them, try to repress them, and then finally make grudging concessions when they had to. Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak a little to the position of people like myself and yourself, and I suspect a lot of us in this room, that, you know, we're not the poorest of the poor. We have the resources to drive across the state or fly across the country to come here, but at the same time we don't have $1 million to drop on campaign contributions. We don't really have the freedom to set our own course because we are still working, you know, a working week, even if we're working at a nice job. I mean, what are we? Are we the oppressors or are we the oppressed? Where do we stand?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I don't understand that question. Of course we're oppressed. Yeah, so people live well. You can live well. It's not the class you come from, and it's the class you identify with, and it's the values.
Poor amongst
you
poor
want,
with a bad perspective, yeah.
And those values
that's
are
a
being
good way to
destroyed
put
and
it, Tool,
violated.
for Twitch.
Do you want a clean and livable environment? Then you're one of the oppressed, because those guys are sticking it
Many
up
of
you
them are
one side and
many
back
might
down
be
the other.
captured
Every
into the
time you go
labor
out there and take a breath of
aristocracy
air,
by
you're the
their own
oppressed.
like ideological confusion, but yeah. I mean, they're exploited insofar as they're working class, you know?
Okay, do you want clean and edible food that's not full with pesticides and everything else? Then you're one of the oppressed. Do you want to work like a dog all the time and not have time to recreation, or live in a community where there's some civility and safety? If you want the latter, then you're the oppressed. Of course we're oppressed. Now that doesn't mean the oppressed does not necessarily mean you're just sitting on a corner with a cup in your hand. There are all sorts of forms, and so this is not. We're not here just to help the poor unfortunates who are lower in the income scale than us. We're here also to fight for our own interests. Yeah.
I was interested, you talked about government deficits or ballooning government deficits as a tool for creating safe investments in terms of treasury bills, a larger treasury debt. I wonder if you could speak to the fact that a lot of
relatively safe, because nothing's really safe because the government could
full
default
faith
to,
and credit,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
The fact that a lot, I think the majority of U.S. government bonds are held in other countries, in fact, a huge proportion in China. So I'm curious about that, how you see that in the framework you're talking about.
Well, that they're ruling class elements all over the world. It's internationalized, yeah. Or with deficit trade, a lot of that could be just a way of making up the deficit, that these countries will take these dollars, you know, in exchange.
Yeah, China's
they don't take bonds. They take U.S. dollars. They get reserves of immense reserves of dollars. Are you sure bonds? That's usually just done. You know, the Saudi family owns. The Saudi family owns a lot more U.S. bonds than all of us in this room put together, and then another 10 other rooms. 1,000 other rooms. Yeah. We have to make these the last two questions. Even though I told you not to get up, I told you not to get up and keep your seat. Quick question. Quick answer to it.
I'm sorry, it isn't really a question. Somebody asked a little while ago, what can they do? And we had a lady from WILPF speaking. I'm Michael Greenman with the UUJEC and the First UU Church of Columbus, Ohio. There's an article in the Call about the fact that we had Ward Morehouse, the founder of POCLAD, in our community a few months ago. We've started a group in the Unitarian Churches network, which we refer to as Citizens for Democracy and Ending Corporate Rule. And we're trying to pull together Unitarian congregations as activist groups to address that on a local issue in their communities.
Okay, well, that's exactly what UUJEC is also trying to do, isn't it? So I hope you coordinate, work together.
Said I'm
okay, right,
part of
good.
that. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, see the man and get his leaflet if you are interested. Please. Yeah.
Could you just succinctly state a few points of what you would see a more desirable social, political, and economic order to be?
Oh, listen to that. I think you can get that from what I've just said, an order where most of the major industries would be publicly owned and be used for, not for profit, but for development.
Yeah, I don't know about that guy's last comment either, Dorian.
A society in which we would cut our military budget.
I think the majority is, I mean, China, I know, has a large chunk of it because not all U.S. private investors at this point see investing in the U.S. as a good investment.
In Against Empire and in Democracy for the Few, I have a whole, at the end.
There's one reason, so by the way, some people have speculated that Kissinger went to China, in addition to trying to, whatever, with talk about tension.
Obvious the things we want. Better environmental protections and regulations, stronger labor unions, public ownership of these giant corporations, the end of corporate personhood would be certainly true, limiting them, drastic cuts in military spending with an eye to totally eliminating the military except for minimal defenses, and you can go on and on. What?
Yeah, most definitely corporations who hold bonds
surely,
as well.
Surely, you know, no. The problem is not what we would do. We all know what we would do. Stop this crazy space station program going to Mars. How about paying attention to Earth and all that? The question is, how do we get them to do it? And that's what we got to keep struggling with, I think.
Thank you, Michael, very much for all the analysis you've done for so many years.
There's our Parenti talk for the night. Pretty fucking good, wasn't it, Chad? I'm going to be on tomorrow as well, by the way, but I'm going to be doing, I think, like the Zelda game that I was just playing. I'm going to be doing that, but I'm going to be doing a version of it where you comrades can come in and spend your labor vouchers and cause things to happen in my Zelda game. So, like, you can turn the floor to ice or take away my hearts or even help me if you're so inclined. And then also, on Monday, we're going to be watching this.
30 cal heavy machine gun, 105 HP, 60mm mortar.
Keep the rest on full alert. Wait to spring the trap.
他们一定会呼叫增援，往后就越来越难打了。 难打，越难打就更要打。7连和9连配合，冲过去，分4路行动，扎桥。我打！那是我们的边界，祖国的方向。新中国万岁！新中国万岁！新中国万岁！新中国万岁！
Alright, so that's gonna be Monday. We're gonna watch that movie. And then the next movie we watch following that will be Comrade Kim Goes Flying, as we decided.
엄마, 비둘기는 어떻게 하늘을 나나?
그건 날개가 있기 때문이란다.
나도 날개가 있으면 하늘을 날 수 있나?
그럼.
뛰어내리라!
떠서 다니지 말고 땅에 밟고 추살하라. 노동자 이술 직전에 출연시킵시다.
아닙니다. 잠깐만.
너는 땅속에서나 하늘을 날아보겠다고?
누워서 침에 들면 제 얼굴에 떨어진다는 걸 알아요.
부처녀가 자꾸만 눈앞에 울거리는 게 미안하는 거 말이에요.
Doesn't this look awesome? Try to go to sleep, catastrophic failure. Oh no, that's never any fun. That sounds like me. That's like every night for me. So yeah, those are the 2 movies coming up that we're going to be watching. And then, as I always remind comrades, you know, I got my theory list that you can look up anytime by typing the command theory list. It'll just bring you to this document. Got like a whole bunch of all great works here, and I want to keep adding to them too. So, related to that, if you are so inclined, you can also join up on our Discord. Now, it's not so much like other people's other streamers' Discords, I should say. This is more of a multi-streamer communist community. We also have Comrade Valkyrie who streams, and Comrade Vivian Vampire is also a recognized streamer with us. But other than that, we're just a great community of communists. It's very active. Been around for 10 years or more almost. And if you like playing games but want to avoid reactionaries, it's a great place to find people to play games with as well. Check that out. Join up if you'd like. And any suggestions or anything, you can like leave them in my chat in there. Just when you go in, you answer 5 questions just so we know, you know, you're a human and not just a troll, etc. And at the bottom, if you want to just let the server know that you came from the Leaping Larry live stream, which will be, I think, the 4th question, then I'll just add you to my little tag, and whenever I go live, I can tag you. Get a little notification that way, maybe. Yeah, check us out. And anything you think I should add to this, you can leave in my little chat there. Now, my plan is eventually to get to all of these reads pretty well and more. Right now, we are on this one, Red Skin, White Mask, Glenshon Coulthard, which we'll be doing again Tuesday morning. So this is about rejecting the politics of recognition, basically. It goes into some of the things I was talking about earlier regarding like Marxism and First Nations spirituality and like ideas. It is a really big reading list. I've had it for a while now. Also mentioned too before that I think something interesting we could check out is there's this fantastic resource here that we compiled a while ago. And this is just like DPRK textbooks. And of course, most of them are in Korean, but you can find English ones here as well. Like, see, here's an English language one. And see, they actually like some of these, they have like a better history and stuff than some of our Western textbooks. So anyone who wants to look through that, this link here will bring you to this first English book that I'm looking at here. But now if you go along the left side here, you can see there's another English one here, number 5. So there you go. So if you want to try and discount the whole narrative about DPRK not learning about other countries, you can easily debunk that by looking in their school books. And then this will be the work after Red Skin, White Masks. Giving priority to ideological work is essential for accomplishing socialism. That's Kim Jong-il. Now don't forget also, I'm a contributing editor over here at Iskra Books. Highly recommend you comrades make use of this resource, not just because I'm helping out over here, I promise you. Like, here's one of our, this is one that I read not that long ago, Brandon Hughes, The Dark, Select Writings of, Brandon Hughes is an Irish revolutionary. And this also has some letters from related revolutionaries. And by the way, any of our books, you know, you can purchase them, but you can also get a free PDF of any of them right here as well. Okay, here's the Irish revolutionary one. At the beginning, you'll see there's a bunch of different letters from other ones. These selected essays. Anthony McIntyre. A whole bunch of good ones in here. And I think by the 10th, I know we get a little bit delayed on it. We apologize for that. But by the 10th, we'll have Stalin, History and Critique of a Black Legend out. That should be available as a free PDF then. This is the first authorized English translation where the family and the friends of Lusardo actually gave the blessing for this translation and looked it over and said it was accurate and everything like that. So very exciting that this is about to be out. Perhaps we'll have to read this sometime on stream. And then, of course, you know, I would recommend, this is a great one I've read as well. Socialist Education in Korea and Collected Works of Stalin. And then, by the way, we have the journals here as well. Peace, Land, Bread. I don't know if any of you comrades have seen these before. These are sort of like our journal thing that we've been doing. Like a kind of passion project thing. this is the first one here. I'll link it to you. Here's a good quote. Anyone who has learned anything from history or from Marxism will have to admit that a political analysis must focus on the class issue. What class represents the revolution and what class the counter-revolution. Without the victory of the revolutionary proletariat, there can be no peace for people, land for the peasants, nor bread for the workers and all working people. Love that quote. Oh, there's your Juche gang right here. So, when you come down to the bottom, our graphic designer is great, by the way. Got all kinds of great little articles in here. But if you come down to the bottom here, you'll find my article. I don't know if any of you have followed me on YouTube or not, on Juche Gang. But you can find my Juche lessons getting their start in writing here on the Iskra book site. This was my first one. We got I'm in a couple of them. I think I'm missing one Juche lessons because I had some personal crap going on. Personal activism that needed taken care of. Yeah, there you go. Find me in the Peaceland Bread if you want some written work of mine. Tried watching them, but I got stuck in lesson 2. Gotta try again. Yeah. I mean, it's understandable. It's like a fundamentally different way of thinking, you know? It's a revolutionary way of thinking. And on this channel, we are going to eventually circle back and get to on the Juche idea again. And when we do that, like, I'll be able to explain live as well some of the different principles and stuff. So if you're able to catch that, you'll be able to ask me any misunderstandings or anything even that might help you get over anything that you're misunderstanding about it. Once it clicks, it clicks. And also sometimes I find if you go on to further ones, it might answer questions in previous lessons as well too sometimes. Yeah, just a thought. It may help, it may not. If it doesn't, then you can always return backwards. But I did set them up, like, the way I kind of set them up is like, if you notice, I have 3 different playlists. So if you go to my channel, I think it's messier looking. Oh no, it should be good looking. Yeah, see, because of mine. But see, this is chapter 3. Messier looking because you can see all my private ones on here. But I tried to separate them into 3 different chapters. 3 is the guiding principle. Here it is. 1 is philosophical principles. And then 2 right here, socio-historical principles. So like, if you get this whole, by the time you get through this whole one, it should, like, each one should complement the one before and after it. And if not, like I say, we will get back to on the Juche idea. Once we finish some of these other reads that we got on the list here. Because the thing is, I want to get on the Juche idea on this website. And I didn't actually download the VOD of it or anything. So, we will get to it again. Do not worry. Alright, now we are actually going to raid La Sioux. Remember everyone, I'm going to be back tomorrow. if you're interested in watching me play some Zelda, you can come in and affect my gameplay with your channel points or labor vouchers as we call them. And you can also come in and talk to me about communism or whatever else. Get me rambling. It's a game. You may make an announcement, Dorian. What's up? For fans of meteor showers, the Delta Acrorid shower starts tonight and it lasts for another 3 weeks. So if you're outside, look south. You should see it. Oh, nice. Are you in the northern or southern hemisphere, Dorian? Northern? Perfect. Gonna definitely be looking for that. Thank you so much for that information. Oh, didn't mean to make you stare into the void. Ah, almost did a whole stream without doing that. Now bear with me because we are gonna raid Lost Sioux here. Just first up, I want to leave as I always do, which is to leave you comrades with a quote to think about. In capitalist society, individuals are controlled by a pitiless law, usually beyond their comprehension. The alienated human specimen is tied to society as a whole by an invisible umbilical cord, the law of value. This law acts upon all aspects of one's life, shaping its course and destiny. You're in the Rocky Mountain area of the US. Okay, so you're like 4 hours probably different than me. That's cool. I'm definitely going to be looking for those meteor showers. I'm a bit of a space nerd. I'm a space and a video game nerd. They're like two of my special interests. So, also, if those things interest you, join up on our Discord. We're going to raid into Lost Sioux. And again, remember to join me tomorrow for some Zelda. You can make me suffer if you want. And Monday, we're going to be watching our movie, Battle at Lake Changjin Part 2. And then Tuesday is Theory. Thank you so much, chatters. Thank you, viewers. It was great having you all here, hanging out with me, watching some videos. I hope you all have a great night. And we had lots of great stuff planned for the future. I'm gonna find you a great soundbite here.
So I taught them all about Cuba, and they really took to it. You know, Marxism, the workers' revolution, the clothing.
All right, comrades, it was awesome. Make sure to give Lost Sioux lots of love. we got the best sound bites on Twitch, chat. Come back soon. Love you all. Bye, comrades.
The crash is confirmed.
Hey, Larry. Thank you for the raid. Welcome.